Hello everybody, welcome back. Just bear with me, I'm a little bit slow tonight, a bit of practice, I need more practice. I'm going to play Nuclear Exceptionalism. It's a 2-minute 30-second song, it's really good. And I put a link in the description so people can find it. And then I'll be back and we're going to start the show. We got a big die-off show, unfortunately, to do tonight. Incredible information. We're going to start off with the tsunami, earthquake, and we'll get into all the die-offs. All the whales worldwide are showing up emaciated. So just bear with me. I'll be back 2.5 minutes. I'm just not quite ready.
They said it was clean, too cheap to meter. Built the dome, then cooked the beaker. Said the rod was safe as sealed in drums, but left them leaking out of Idaho slums. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. They chase the sun, all fusion proud. Ignore the barrels stacked in clouds. Promise stars in every socket, while curium settled in the market. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. Chart is clean, while whales rolled up inside the submarine. Blame the algae, blame the rain, but never trace the gamma chain. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. Now the rods are rusting, the record spins. Mama warned them, too many sins. Keep your son, keep your lab coat pride, till you fix the waste you tried to hide. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done.
That was a little bit fast on the slide across. What was it? Let me check that one more time. Yeah, I think it's like... now, is my audio good tonight? I did change a few things in my audio. Because I got my cup there and the equalizer kind of might have almost got moved around a bit. All right. And so that song, I could probably listen to that song over and over and over in the background of one of these shows, let alone over and over. Really, it's a really well done song, right? It's an amazing... I have to listen to it a couple times a day. That's when that happens. She's a hit, that's for sure. That's a big hit. In the future, that's going to be a massive hit. All right, we're slowly. Tonight we got a big show, big die-off show. We got a big list in the playlist of die-off shows. Not all the die-off shows are going to be in that list because I can't keep up with everything, unfortunately. I got to start adding again to my die-off list. And just let me show that to you. very quick. So if you go to my playlist, that's my front page, the mass species die-off list, click on full playlist, and you'll get an endless amount of what you're seeing here tonight. So our poll tonight, will you miss the whales, the insects, the birds when they're gone? In just a few years, they'll be gone. And I know this sounds crazy if you've never been here before, but bear with me. Due to Fukushima radioactive fallout. And we're up, here we go. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on the preamble, because sometimes the preamble could be 40 minutes of this stuff to show you why we're conflating radioactive fallout, because that's what we're doing, with a couple of buildings in Japan. So it doesn't seem realistic that a couple of buildings has that particular attribute. And unfortunately, and one of the ways I like to explain it is, why did the worldwide media pretend they're on top of Reactor 4 in Japan, and Reactor 3, by the way? And here's what they looked like when they done that. They looked like these two buildings here, and they were pretending they were on top of the buildings. But they weren't in Japan. They'd done it, the videos, most of them were, I'm pretty sure, were done in the United States, who have 70 identical buildings. And so a nuclear meltdown is infinitely different. If you had, how would I compare it? 10,000 oil tankers cracking open on the ocean over 5 days. Still wouldn't compete with 4 buildings in Japan. Now, because so this is a model of radioactive fallout of neptunium-239. We're going to get right into the show here in a minute. And so the model to your left is 20 days of radioactive fallout from Japan's reactors. At the top of each of the reactors, it could have been up to 8 reactor cores. These are huge, each one of them compared to Chernobyl. Chernobyl was a small reactor, it was a graphite reactor, it was a brand new reactor. And that doesn't mitigate the radioactive fallout from Chernobyl. Chernobyl closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom in 1957. Fukushima, each reactor was probably equal to 100 because they're pure uranium, pure plutonium. So when you see a neptunium-239, neptunium-239 is the same as plutonium, where it's going to decay in 2.5 days, in 2.5 days, to plutonium-239. And plutonium kills all the animals with multiple tumors, and most of the tumors are in the bones, but it's not just, that plume is not just going to have plutonium, it's going to have this incredible, terrifying diversity of anthropogenic man-made radioactive fallout. And so the journalists are at it again. Fukushima's like eating a banana, walking in the sunshine, flying on an airplane. But that's what they've been saying about nuclear for 80 years. And hello to all you wonderful people, by the way. Colette says the volume's louder. And yet we got a story about the wasp coming up right away. Well, nothing's right away on this show. We're back. By the way, I'll explain that later on. I'm not going anywhere. The nuclear industry is not getting rid of me this easy. I can tell you that much right now. I have no intentions of going anywhere. Especially with all you wonderful people out there. We need a spot to have this conversation. So here's the recent, let's get into it. We're doing die-off show tonight. Symmetrically worldwide, we're seeing all the whales showing up, emaciated. And the media is coming out and claiming ship strikes and entanglement, which is true for an incredible tiny fraction of the animals. The wonderful, beautiful, majestic, the biggest species on the planet are emaciated, starving to death. And so when I say emaciation, it means your rib cage, their spinal column, their shoulder bones are clearly visible. This is peanut heads. This is something we've never seen pre-Fukushima nuclear meltdowns. We didn't need a Fukushima nuclear event to end up in this way. It would have been somewhere down the road, we would end up in the same place because there's 1,000 fuel pools worldwide full of reactor cores still splitting atoms with no containment. And to the academic community, you know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean. 4 whales that beached in Japan have been stranded by huge earthquakes that triggered tsunami warnings, says experts. That's the Daily Mail, by the way. That story is viral. It's everywhere. The story is not true, but it's gone viral. Now, the whales actually beached the day before. And you notice the pictures. You see these pictures up there? They're the 2 dark pictures. That was the majority of the pictures you were seeing. It was a very grainy... It's like someone took a screen capture of an old-fashioned TV. Then they posted pictures or screen captures of that. It was purposely made so that you couldn't, in that first 24 hours anyway, that you couldn't make an assertion on your own. You couldn't look at the animal and see and be able to appreciate whether it's had any kind of derivation attached to it. Which is crazy that we're talking about stuff like that. So March the 15th, 2011, 4 days after Fukushima, we had 4 reactors and 8 fuel pools melt down. The fuel pools holds decades of reactor cores, and they're just as volatile as an operating reactor core. They're gone through a chain reaction, so everything there is splitting atoms. So when you break it up into trillions of pieces, each piece is still splitting atoms for millions of years. Each piece is a perpetual machine, an actual perpetual machine. The only perpetual machine that we have is nuclear power plants. They perpetually produce poison that is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison to everything with replicating cells. And so we're doing a die-off video, and that includes them tonight. They successfully covered up all of this, and I'm not going to bore you with the video. I'll just play a little tiny fraction of it.
What I'm standing is on top.
This is just a fraction of media claim, and they're at the top of the building. And the reason they're doing it because it's radioactive folly. We're almost through this. We'll get into the show another 5 clicks. I just want to give you some background in case you've never been here before and you can't comprehend the enormity of what a few buildings can do to a planet. And trust me, I absolutely can understand your skepticism if you have some. You won't have it after the show, though, I can assure you. Because I'll give you the documentation, you can make an informed decision. It's a complicated subject, so I need to explain it to you. Right? There's a lot of factors, there's a lot of details, a lot of minutiae that are not going to become evident or clear on your own. Even if you go after this for 2 years without ever seeing my video, you'll get many times order of magnitude here in a show than you will doing your own research. I give you a good foundation so you don't get sucked into the propaganda machine. And it's prolific. Your medias, your universities, and your governments are all working together to manipulate and deceive. Okay, so reactor 4, reactor 3 and 4. So we have all the different sides. The buildings actually are not intact. So the fuel pools were at the top of the buildings, they're gone. I just want you to hear Frank Hippel on March the 16th, day 5, and he was on MSNBC, and they were asking him, it doesn't matter who the host is, it's the news organization itself. So here you have MSNBC is asking Professor Frank von Hippel, how many reactor cores are in each of the fuel pools? Remember, there's 8 reactor fuel pools that were destroyed, and their inventories were released into the environment. And the environment, after 25 days, looks like that. We covered the whole planet and the stuff that they're about to talk about. I'll be right back.
And if, in terms of what we know about the...
My apologies.
And if, in terms of what we know about the capacity, about how many fuel rods would likely be inside that reactor, what sort of quantity are we talking about radioactivity?
I've heard different numbers ranging from 2 to 15 reactor cores worth. 2 to about 8 reactor cores worth.
So if it can't be controlled, that's worst case scenario, 8 reactors worth of radioactivity.
Right. Right.
And it would be released into the atmosphere.
Radioactivity. By the way, the fact that this has happened at unit number 4 is understandable, and is consistent with the theory that it really did dry out, because the fuel from the unit number 4 was most recently discharged, and therefore was the hottest, and therefore the water would have boiled off more rapidly.
Okay, so up to 8 reactor cores, maybe 16, who really knows, but up to 8 reactor cores per fuel pool, and 8 fuel pools. I'm sorry, the top of the buildings have 2 fuel pools. So the way we lowball it by saying there's 4 reactor cores per fuel pool, but there could be 8, right? So we're saying, counting the actual reactor cores, we've lost 36 reactor cores in 4 of these buildings. And that's what the media is pretending it. And that's what a radioactive fallout looks like then. That's plutonium. And then we've got one more to go, and then we get into the show. And this is radioactive fallout. This is based on 31 days. And this is really important. This is the French government. This is not me. None of this is me. I'm showing you the accumulation of data, of documentation. And then I'm able to string it together to tell these stories. Now, this is the plume covering the whole planet. And pretending that this has no adverse side effects upon you and your loved ones and the species is you're being dishonest. And this is cesium-137. It pulses energy 600 feet every second, each atom. So think of an invisible snowstorm covering the planet for 300 years. Let's pretend no other isotope exists for a minute. So if there's not 1,000 other isotopes, which is just a single one, which according to the nuclear industry, that's their version, you got a plume covering the planet like an invisible snowstorm after 31 days that never goes away. For everybody on this planet will be dead, and this will be here for hundreds of more years. And everything that is in contact or in proximity to it, their DNA, their chromosomes, their cells are mutated and destroyed. And their body are attacking that destruction with white blood cells in desperation. And they can't repair it because it's pulsing energy every second. They can't keep up with that damage. And they'll if it's in the body, and it is, they'll attack the source in your body with white blood cells for the rest of your life, which means each species has less oxygen, less nutrition, because for every red blood cell carrying oxygen nutrition, you have to get rid of one to produce a white blood cell. And you can produce white blood cells, and you do, in all your joints, not just your spleen. I lost my spleen, so I know a few things about that in a motorcycle accident. That's not lost on me. And so James Lewis sent me this story just before we went live, and I was like, well, that's right in line with what I'm doing tonight, right? And James is not doing very good. He's in pretty rough shape. I'm not going to, if he wants to get in the comment section, tell you guys, that's up to him, but I'm not going to say what's going on. But it's, I went through it a couple of years ago, let's put it that way, right? He's okay, he'll be okay, but he's definitely not comfortable. So he probably won't be producing songs, but I'm sure he's out there watching. Radioactive wasp nest found at a site where the United States once made nuclear bombs. This is Savannah River, I believe. Workers at the site, Savannah River, South Carolina, that once made key parts for nuclear bomb. And the reason that I was asking that question is because the nuclear industry has so many Superfund sites and all these national laboratories. It's a tasking job, even with the experience I have, to keep up with, all these different sites. For nuclear bomb, there's over 400 nuclear plants worldwide. So when you're talking about a nuclear plant, just because you're at this all the time doesn't mean you know every nuclear power plant, right? We know them all, but the details can be lost in translation, so to speak. But all nuclear plants have a lot of things in common, so that's helpful. Key parts for nuclear plant bombs in the United States found a radioactive wasp nest. Now, there was no wasp in the nest because radiation kills the insects, but the wasp nest was there. And they were most likely bringing back radioactive insects to feed on, right? And that eventually contaminated the nest. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on any of this. There's many things could have caused it. That was just my uninformed insight. The nest has a radiation level 10 times what is allowed by federal regulations. So 10 times. So that's a little scary. Are they suggesting that a wasp nest, a bee's nest, has an acceptable level of man-made radiation? Right? But it's considered. It was disposed of as radioactive waste. Japan just dumps it in the ocean, never stopped, right? There's a crazy facet to this story. It's absurd, and that's why I say it's a really important story. The report said there was no leak from, and you'll see it coming up at the end here. Said there's no leak from the radioactive waste tanks. Well, how are you going to quantify that assertion when these tanks are lethal doses in proximity to them? They can't quantify that type of assertion. The nest it's been abandoned for a long time, that area. And the nest was likely radioactive through what's called on-site legacy radioactive contamination from the residual radioactivity left from when the site was fully operational. He said, I'm mad as a hornet, like downplaying it. It's a pretty despicable thing to do in something so important, right? Anytime species are being harmed or exterminated, jokes are not, well, I shouldn't say words like that because I'll make jokes about the nuclear industry. The site generated more than 165 million gallons, 625 million liters of liquid nuclear waste, which has this is absurdness, through evaporation. So they evaporated the nuclear waste into the environment. So each liter is a dirty bomb of this stuff. Each liter is full of particulates that are splitting atoms. And this is what, they do this everywhere, by the way. And then what's left over, they'll call it sludge. And then they'll encase it. Whenever you hear them talking about putting it in cement or in some kind of compound to contain it, it's the remainder. This is absurdness that they've done that. It's completely, it's the equivalent, like there's no equivalent in industry to nuclear. Nuclear is the litany for poison. Each atom is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. So imagine evaporating. You reduce it down to 34 million gallons. So they evaporated 130 million gallons. 130 million gallons. 130 million gallons is... just give me a second. I'll bring it up for you. And, first off, it's not environmentally friendly stewardship to do that. If I had a nuclear company, if North Korea done it, they would call it crimes against humanity. Let's put it that way. 130 million. It's just surreal, isn't it? Divided by 45-gallon drums. So how many drums is it? It's 2.8 million drums. 2.8 million 45-gallon drums. Let me do another number for you to really bring it into perspective. 130 million gallons, 131 million gallons. This is incredible that we're having this conversation. And we're going to divide it by the 300,000 gallon massive tanks they have at Hanford. Right? They have 57 million gallons, 177 tanks in the ground. 177 in the ground. They spent literally tens and tens and tens of billions of dollars to try to come up with a solution for it. And so Savannah River and Hanford done the same thing, don't get me wrong, they dumped 450 billion gallons into the soil. So Hanford has 177 tanks. Savannah River, the same tanks, the same size, evaporated 436 of them, 6666666 appropriately, into the environment. This is madness that they done that. And then you wonder why there's so much cancer and heart problems and liver problems and lung problems and respiratory and pituitary worldwide. Because these are big, like if this was a nuclear accident, it would be considered a massive nuclear accident. They did the same thing at 3 Mile Island. And that stuff was fuel particulates. These were nuclear meltdown materials that they released into the environment. The industry is completely out of control. And that's an incredibly important story tonight. There are still 43 of the underground tanks in use, but they boiled off 466 basically of those tanks, right? Okay. I got to put that in my collection of holy shit. Again. Of just what is wrong with this industry. The people in the industry are insane. This is insane that they've done something like that. And in Hanford, they boil off or they release directly into the soil. Nuclear. No, this wasn't nuclear water. Who knows how much of that they dumped? 450 billion gallons is equal to a 6-foot wide aquarium of nuclear waste, the splitting atoms, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet more than once. And so, no, Dana, everything fits in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Okay, so recently, gray whale die-off feared, more updates on this story. As starving whales migrate north, die-off feared as starving whales. They were already in poor shape when they started their migration, so there's around 13,000 of them left. And so the migration, they do a 12,000 migration last year south, and they were starving at actual emaciation. And they had no surviving babies that made it to the breeding grounds. No first-year babies made it back. This year they have 88, and they're severely emaciated, headed north. And they're showing up everywhere. I mean, they're literally, figuratively skin and bones, which is, nobody's ever seen anything like this before. All of these stories are post-Fukushima events. And you see 1,000 videos on my site right now, right? But don't forget, I produced over 3,000 on my other site of the same stuff. They took that site down with 24,800 subscribers. And defunded me, right? That was a good way to defund me. And so there's only a few people that are found me and are in a position to help. And we'll talk about that at the end of the show, hopefully. The whales we are seeing are extremely emaciated. Extremely emaciated. Bulging ribs with shoulder blades, vertebrae visible even for the shoreline. We're seeing the same thing with killer whales. This was Belgium. 2 months ago or something. Whales spotted off the Belgium coast. This is the story right now of this whale. A fin whale. Now we got a current news cycle. We got a huge story to get through. But we got 2 of these stories to get through. Then we're going to be into the regular news. Noting it appeared to be thin. It appeared to be thin. And this is a picture of it, by the way. It looks a little thin. You can see the rib cage. The whale looks deflated. And look at the tail. How flat it is. That's not normal, by the way. There was a fin whale, right? And then there was a turtle showed up on the Belgian beach. But there was also a killer whale washed up on the Belgian beach. These are 3 things they've never seen there before showed up. And the fin whale and the killer whale is severe emaciation. So when I talk about emaciated, I'm talking about the final days of these majestic animals. And now all the species, animals, whales rather, are showing up like this worldwide. So this is not just the Pacific Ocean thing. and look at the significance. So you got other pictures coming up. You can kind of see the peanut head starting there. You can see the shoulder blade sticking up. You can count all the rib cages, all of them. These are things we've never ever seen. And killer whale is an apex predator. It can eat over 300 species for its diet, which is exceptional, right? And they eat other whales too. Well, to see the shoulder bone sticking up, and then the curvature right there is part of the head. That part is known as a peanut, because there's a big chunk of meat that belongs to it, right, in blubber. And so when you see that, that means, we've never seen it before Fukushima. You see all the rib cages and the flat tail. And this picture here, you can see the peanut head, what they call the consensus of the academic community. And so that meant at least 10 whales were in this shape. Because for every whale you see, there's 9 that sank and you didn't see, or washed up somewhere else you didn't see. You don't see any damage from birds, animals. Now, yesterday, we were at this big event. There's like 20,000 people there. And just go there and kill. I didn't do very good. I couldn't travel very far, but it's too hot out anyway. There was no birds. There was 20,000 people at this regular summer event. It's free to get in and everything. And there's a whole lot of these kiosks there, and there's a lot of them are serving, fast food. Not very good at that, I'm assuming. I would never eat there. There was no birds. There was no birds on the poles, no birds on any of the buildings. There was no birds on the telephone wires, no birds fighting. And there was all these kids and everything else. And there was all this food, and there was food everywhere you looked on the ground. There was no scavengers. There was no flies on top of that. That was insane to see that yesterday. That was insane. Particularly at this time of the year when you got all the migratory species. So the killer whale in Belgium. And then there was another story a month later of, not this one. This was different pictures where you didn't, because we were trying to gather the evidence. You can see the rib cage, of course. And the peanut head. And that really thin tail is simply not normal. And there's one up in, and I must have, and so this one was June the 26th, a little over a month ago. Is this one here? And so this one turns out, you can see the rib cage up there. And it was hard to find a picture of it. Finally, this story was the story where I started getting, you can see the real thin tail, you can see the rib cage sticking out. They were describing it as a large whale and that it was unusual. This is in New Zealand. But this animal was severe emaciation. It was only I read like 3 stories where they actually said the animal was healthy. A healthy killer whale washed up. And so I kept pursuing the story, and I was looking for these pictures, right? You can see the peanut head. Not so clear, though, as the Belgian whale. That doesn't mean... And then the incredibly thin tail. He said they're quite uncommon. It was 6 feet long, was quite large for an adult female. 6 meters long, 18 feet. Quite large was an interesting thing to say about an emaciated whale. I believe their condition, she may have been struggling to feed for a while. So that was pretty, but all the stories were based around not acknowledging that the animal had starved to death or even had issues. This was one of the few connotations where they acknowledged it was struggling. And I never really heard that narrative, that framing of the narrative, struggling to feed for a while. What are you talking about? They eat 300 plus species. Why would a killer whale of all species be struggling to feed? And why are we seeing them showing up on different continents worldwide in the same conditions? They're very social animals, so they normally travel with a large pod. So when I was a commercial diver, if we seen a single a killer whale we considered a rogue whale, I wouldn't dive. Neither would anybody in the fleet. You take that day off because they're very transient. The so-called, they were kicked out of the family, right? It was usually because there's something wrong with them, right? They were too aggressive. But they're very social animals anyway, so it's very unusual. You know, I remember I was all suited up in the dive gear and I was going to drop off the boat. And what I have the boat do is, like when I come up to change tanks, you know, we'll drift out offshore so you don't have to pay attention to rocks and that, and they can pay attention to me and change out my gear for me because you can't do nothing, right? When you're diving, you do 2 marathons on the human body each day, and we were diving 10 tanks a day at 90 feet in that particular dive for like 2.5 months or something for green urchins, yeah, up by Telegraph Cove, if I remember correctly. Okay, so when I jump off the back of the boat, I usually have the boat moving away from me, right, in a clockwise circle. And then when I step off, they'll straighten up the wheel and drive off in the deeper water and wait for me to come back up. And that way I don't get caught close to the prop, right, or the wash. Because I've had to wash, like, blow the face mask, the Pegasus right off my head. It's not a very nice feeling, tumbling over. You're trying to avoid this prop. Whatever, anyway, this got nothing to do with tonight. Let's keep going. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, the story I was telling was I went to walk off the back of the boat and there's a pole there so I got my balance because you're wearing a lot of lead, you're carrying a lot of equipment, you got tanks on your back, you're a big, clumsy machine, right? But when you step in the ocean, you're very graceful, so to speak. You're very slow, but you're very graceful. And here was a killer whale, man. Right when I went to step off, because they'll kick it out of gear before I step off. Just a double safety, right? And so the boat's not moving too fast for me. So I go to step off, and here's the killer whale. I'm hanging onto the pole. I'm all suited up. I'm strapped. I got all the equipment on my arms. And I got to hang on to the pole, that pole wasn't, it was just meant for me to keep my balance. And so here I was, I had to grab the pole with both arms because here was a killer whale right underneath me, looking right at me, like staring me right in the face. But there was a lot of killer whales there. I just think it was curiosity. They were checking us out. I hope, anyway. But anyway, we went somewhere else. They're very social. I'm swimming around pods. They are very competent in shallow water. Yeah, they'll chase seals and that up on the beaches and grab them and yank them back, right? So beaching they're used to beaching. They beach all the time. They're conditioned for it. They're trained. They pass on those skills to their babies. From her condition, she may have been struggling to feed. Well, how can a whale, the apex predator that feeds on over 300 species, look up what does a killer whale eat and you'll see what I mean. They eat over 300 species, including birds. They eat whatever they feel like, basically. As soon as you see that tail, there's no, that to me, and you'll see the bones on the side, not so much in these pictures, and that's not an accident. That all the pictures of everything else are very high quality on that site. The pictures of the emaciated whale, very, very low qualities. You can see the rib cage up on the top is undeniable. Okay. So you figured that a necropsy would hopefully reveal why it died, but it could be a number of things, including illnesses or boat strikes. So why would you invoke the words boat strikes when you can see its rib cages and that it's emaciated? You know, and they even acknowledge she's struggling to feed. Okay, here we go. So this is the recent news cycle we're going to jump into. 4 whales that beach in Japan could be stranded by huge earthquakes that triggered tsunami warnings, says experts. So the story was prolific, and so I knew that didn't happen because the Russia earthquake and tsunami was on the east side. So think of South Korea, North Korea, Russia, China Russia is the backside, right, of the continent, on the other side of Japan, not facing North America. And Chiba Prefecture is where that happened, which was really interesting. And that all the media, and big medias at that, were coming out, and there was a crazy amount of medias I'd never heard of before. This story went viral. It simply wasn't true. But it was quite the break for Japan, because these whales were emaciated, as you'll see. There was another story that showed up. Did beluga whales really warn of Russia's massive earthquake? But these belugas are emaciated. This was a couple of years ago. This wasn't recent, by the way, even though the headline is suggesting it. But these are emaciated beluga whales, folks. Right, a beluga whale is a very healthy whale, very plump whale. These are not healthy. These are not plump. They were put back in the water on top of that. But the story came out, I don't know, right? I did not cover this story, which is unusual for me. That didn't show up in my feeds, that my different search engines I use is to look for the species die-off, including a calf beached in shallow water. In the video, you will actually see the calf is moving, and so are they. But they're not healthy. They're not what you call healthy belugas by no shape or form. And when you compare them to the pictures you can find, they're absolutely positively emaciated. They're starving to death. Right, that's, I don't know if you see it in the screen captures, but the baby whale can be seen in the video anyway, moving. But that's a clear emaciation of a whale. And the beluga whale is the only whale that can pivot at its head independent of its body when it comes to whales. And they've been trained to do some pretty amazing stuff. They're very social, even on the ocean. If you encounter wild ones, they're actually very social. They're very curious. They'll come up and not necessarily interact with you, but definitely they're very curious. They want to have a good boo at you. So from what I'm seeing, I'm going to make the assertion that they're emaciated also. And this video is 2 years old, I believe. I finally find the rest of it. Successfully rescued whales, ensuring their safe return to the ocean. But these whales are very plump animals, very healthy-looking animals. They don't have, I've never seen them emaciated. What we have here in Canada, haven't we, up in the St. Lawrence? Fact check, video showing 5 stranded beluga whales was not filmed just before 2025 Kamchatka earthquake. It was in 2003. 23, I'm sorry. August 13, 2023. But there's an incredible amount of stories came out asserting that this happened at the same time as they were saying the whales that washed up, the 4 sperm whales that washed up in Japan were there because of the tsunami. Did it actually happen the day before? And guess who? Look at that. Surreal, eh? I don't think we've seen a picture of her before, have we? I put that over in my pile too. The monster. On average, in 2020, this was a 2025 story. 2024 story. February 22nd, 2024. Mariguchi made the assertion that on average more than 300 whale strandings were reported across Japan each year. Pre-Fukushima, that was many times more than the entire planet combined each decade, right? Though the numbers fluctuate every year, in 2020 more than 370. In 2020 there was 370 so-called strandings reported of whales, third time whales. The number decreased to 116 the year before, 2023. And the causes were tidal fluctuations, diseases, and climate changes. Like, these are garbage can diagnoses, and they're still under investigation. As soon as the whale was spotted, prefectural officials started discussing what to do in case it dies, the radioactive whale dies in their bay. There's not 300, like, there might be 370 whales died in Japan in a single year, but it's because of the radiation poisoning that they have cancer and leukemia. They can't uptake nutrition. This is why they're showing up. I'm assuming because there's still food out there. Not a lot, but there's still food. Only 4 days after it showed up and began to decompose at a cost to the public purse of more than 80 million yen. $533,000. $533,000 triggering criticism. But remember, this person is nobody's friend on this planet. Multiple whales washed ashore by tsunami in Japan. This was yesterday, July the 30th. Today's the 31st. July the 31st, I'm not sure. Lately, I've been forgetting to say the date at the beginning of the show. Been doing it for so many years. There's a reason I do it at the beginning of the show, that anybody who's watching the video knows whether it's a recent show or an older show, right? I specifically do it for that reason, in case you're watching it 3 years down the road and you don't realize, because I produce a prolific amount of material. Multiple whales wash ashore by tsunami. So they're suggesting the tsunami is the reason, right? Following a massive earthquake off the east coast of Russia. So it's really interesting that all the journalists, and this was the pictures, this was basically a good picture. I didn't really find any pictures till today. And this was the typical pictures. But you can see here, when you're looking at that picture of the sperm whale, because we're used to this, you can tell it's not a beautiful, symmetrical, lots of blubber. You can see all these indentations, right? This is typical connotations of emaciation. Let me go backwards. So there's all these stories. Heartbreaking video shows giant whale washed up in Japanese beach. This is Chiba. This is right by Tokyo. And you can almost make an assertion with these pictures. But that was the only, these were the pictures we were getting. And this is Chiba Prefecture. Ultimately, we'll get to it, you will see there's a road not very far away from them, right? The other pictures are showing tourists right alongside of them, or, people in Japan are alongside of them. So there was no reason for all the media to rush out with these grainy pictures, is what I'm trying to say. Journalists who are in Tokyo are only 30 minutes away. Chiba is I can't remember how many people live there, but it's a massive city, right? It's 20 kilometers from Tokyo. So there's no reason a journalist couldn't have went there and got a picture. And that, I don't think I've ever seen as bad as pictures as this. But ultimately, when I show you the good pictures, you'll agree with me. These are emaciated whales. So this was one of the very few pictures that started showing up. And when you look at the tails, is a giveaway. The peanut head's a giveaway. These are huge whales, by the way. And when you see a flat tail on a whale, that's not normal. It's like seeing wrinkles on a seal or a sea lion. It's not normal. They're very plump animals. And a whale should have 12 inches of blubber. So you shouldn't see any kind of indentations. It should be a very... so you can see the Kamchatka, Russia. You can see relationship where Japan is too. Well, I don't know if that's the best representation. Maybe I was wrong in my assertions earlier. You can see where Chiba is too. Japanese TV airs footage of several whales stranded on the beach in Chiba Prefecture in Takayama, speculating major tsunami could be the reason. Speculating a tsunami, which, we've never heard that before, that a tsunami was responsible or had the potential for watching whales up on the beach. We've never heard that before. The announcer of the TV show speculated that the major tsunami that hit earlier could be one of the reasons for this. Well, then the people who wrote the story should have speculated that that person had no common sense, no critical thinking skills, like you fine folks. And again, you're getting all these grainy pictures, but the whales they should be very symmetrical, very smooth. The blubber should be 12 inches and is very tough, right? Blubber is very tough. And you can almost make a hockey puck out of a healthy blubber. Like not a permanent hockey puck, but something hard enough you can freeze and use for a hockey puck, so to speak. I don't know if that's a very good comparison. Multiple whales stranded on the Chiba coast. Japanese authority deny a tsunami link. And this was probably the first picture we had from ground zero. And so a lot of these pictures I'm trying to get pictures. These pictures I'm looking at, to me, I'm sure they're emaciated at this stage. Well, I was sure in these kind of pictures, don't get me wrong, but that was the predominant picture. So they were blaming the earthquake, they were blaming the tsunami, and to me it was a big distraction from, the real tsunami was harming, destroying all kinds of things, and the media chose to go this route. And I mean, massive amount of media perpetrated this particular hoax. Journalists, right? People you can trust. They were always hoaxing the planet for some reason. This is the major media. Whales wash ashore in Japan. I mean, there's a lot. They got a lot of readers each day. Millions of them. Ashore in Japan after a huge 8.7 magnitude earthquake triggers a tsunami. A very salacious headline. Captures the imaginations to show you these grainy pictures. And I think what they're doing is they're trying to condition people to seeing the deformity of the whales and associate it with so-called healthy whales, right? It's not healthy to have these types of deformities. Yeah, whales got fins, they got blowholes and stuff like that, but they're very smooth, very symmetrical animals. All of them are, always have been. And so they showed pictures of people in Japan on the roof of buildings because the tsunami was coming in as the first wave hits. Whales wash ashore in Japan. It was really something how many media has regurgitated that narrative. The sight of stranded whales drew national global attention, raising questions about ecological impact of seismic disturbances. So they're trying to set a precedence that, like, down the road they'll say, well, the reason all those whales washes up, and they've done this before, actually, we've caught them at it, where they claimed that an underground earthquake, under ocean earthquake, caused a bunch of whales to beach or die and blow up on coastlines. And so they just delude reality from so many different medias in so many different countries that the average person has no way of just randomly trying to understand what's really going on. Why do whales wash ashore during a tsunami? Well, they don't. Where's the precedence first? Abrupt changes in current water levels can disorient the whale. How could you conceive that? Are you a whale that wrote this story or something? How can you frame the narrative that abrupt changes in current and water levels can whales? I've been out in major hurricanes, and whales are there feeding, just lumbering along, doing what they've done every other day I was out there. It means nothing to them. That's their home, right? That's their environment. Once they go down 30 feet, and they dive really deep, once you dive down 30 feet, they're below the storm. It's flat, calm always. It was like that when I was a commercial diver. So the guys, I used to always apologize in bad weather to the people upstairs because they're getting bounced around. And like I've worked regularly in 50-mile-per-hour winds. Go out and high pea on a few islands or whatever. You still can't get away from the ocean. And the tenders in that would be, well, if you're going down there, I'm not going to be complaining, they would say. And I would say, look, once I get down to 30 feet, it's flat calm. It's always the same. It never changes. And the whale is not stupid. It's not just going to hang out like, first off, it doesn't care about the storm. That's its home. Leading to mass beaching events is simply not true, but look how they're framing that narrative. It's so important every time you find that misinformation, disinformation. And the whole story was disinformation. These whales died the day before. And then all this media, look at this. And they all show you these same pictures. Beached whales spotted on Japan's coast, New Straits Times. We've covered that media a lot. Even big media was out there pumping this story. Now, to be fair, there was some officials saying this simply wasn't true, but they never got a platform compared to this story, right? Drone footage shows beach whales carcasses in central Japan's Chiba prefecture, which is right by Tokyo. So this is what I think this drone, or the next one, was the first clear footage I got. And I can tell this, they were alive, right? They weren't like washed up dead. And they look at them, they're touching each other. They actually washed up together. We've never seen this pre-Fukushima. Like the odds of finding 2 dead whales, and I got headlines about that from 2013, 2014, I think it was, where the media, there was many medias talking about the same story. The odds of finding 2 dead whales on the same beach was astronomical in 2013, 2 years after Fukushima. But it was showing up. The odds of finding 2 dead whales on the beach now is just normal. It's normal. All of this is post-Fukushima. These whales, that's clear emaciation you're looking at there. The animals actually, in the background, you can't see, you can't really appreciate the whale in the background, but he's severe emaciation. Let me zoom in a bit more. You can see the one back here, right? Right behind my head. I'll zoom back out. That's severe emaciation you're looking at. Same here. These whales are, they're very plumb. They're very symmetrical when they're healthy. And just, you see the bone for the head just sticking right out. I've never seen that before, by the way, on a sperm whale. And that's his bottom of his mouth, and that's the top of his mouth. But when you see that up there, that's the peanut head. That's the most severe peanut head I think I've seen in a long time. But clear, and these drone pictures was an independent person, seals the deal that, because I was searching to see why Japan had allowed that to proliferate, right, that narrative, and why the media was pumping that narrative. And they even threw out the beluga whales from 2 years ago into the media. There was a campaign, eh? So when this whale, there was a campaign to distract you from this die off to the belugas. And that was pure desperation. But the media has ability to make things go viral to suit any industry, right? It's called public relations. BP Oil done it. A campaign. This is why you ever hear tell a carbon footprint? That was a large campaign by BP Oil to demonize you for wanting oil, not them for having an old dirty ship that wasn't reliable. That's severe emaciation. And so I ended up having to go way down that hole today too, and yesterday. And this is a severe skin disease, which we've talked about. We got more stories about that coming up, by the way. And Buddy was, this is a student, was getting a tooth out of it. These whales are severe emaciations anyway. We're going to get to other stories now in a moment. The Savannah Riverside boiled off 130 million gallons of highly radioactive sludge. That's absurd, folks. And so there was no reason that journalists couldn't have got down there and got a good picture. They didn't need to show all those grainy pictures. This is a public beach. And I think we got a wide shot where you'll actually see the roads are right there. It's in Chiba Prefecture. They had total access to it, but they chose to go into the grainy picture, make it into a salacious story. This is a... You can see the severe emaciation. That's severe emaciation you're looking at. And the whales are touching each other. Right? Solidarity, the migratory whales, they shouldn't even be there on top of that. These are deep diving whales. They eat squid mainly. But all the pictures are undeniable emaciation anyway. And this is for all species we're seeing. We're going to jump now to the next story. Sorry. Investigation launched as dead whale mysteriously washes ashore. Now, pre-Fukushima, you can kind of put out those headlines because that would be appropriate. Post-Fukushima, you got all the gray whales, for instance, confirmed to be emaciated last year and this year. They're going to be gone in about 2 years. Maybe it'll be, in 2 years, there'll probably be a couple of hundred left, 200 or 300, but it'll be clear they're not going to last the rest of that year. By year 3, in 3 years' time, there will be no gray whales. According to the documentation that we got, they're all emaciated, like severe emaciation, just like the killer whales were showing you earlier. And the sperm whales, we've never seen mass drowning of sperm whales pre-Fukushima. Post-Fukushima, we see it, all species. And so for a couple of years, there was a lot of pilot whales showing up at the end of the migratory route. And they were reporting on them in 2014, 15, and 16 as having no food in their stomachs. It was interesting they were able to do necropsies in 2014 and 15 right on site, but in 2020, 2018, 19, 20, they haven't been able to do it. We have the documentation. We collected all that information, right? A mysterious whale washes ashore. Authorities dispatched a specialist security area to collect samples to investigate the cause of death. Mystery. Which may be related to, and he keeps throwing it out to ship strikes or marine debris. Ship strikes and marine debris. And then the total number of, and let me just bring that up because we need that for the rest of the show. I've had pictures of puffins down here. Now, remember 2 years ago we covered quite a few stories in the late fall of the puffins laying eggs again because none of their eggs hatched. They had no surviving babies and had relaid eggs, but they've never seen them do that before. I've seen recent pictures of puffin colonies because they live a long time, but I didn't see the fledglings. I don't mean they weren't there. It's just, you got to appreciate I got a really good eye for this stuff. I'm paying attention to detail. That's what I do. Okay, hang on. Blah, 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 blah. They're very difficult shows because you got to provide so much documentation because the industry is really good at convincing people that I'm wrong because people would rather believe a lie than the truth. And I get that. I'm not going to hold people at fault for their whole life. They've been indoctrinated by this machine that's extremely good at it. See if I get lucky enough to find. Okay, I found it. It's not always the case with Dana. Here we go. Hello, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Thank you so much, everybody on this planet. We raised a total of $1,450, and that covers my expenses for August. So, but I am going to lose this phone number. I'm not going to be able to keep the phone. I'm going to get another phone cheaper, but I'm not going to be able to, because I was a couple of months in the rear on my bills. It was typical of somebody under pensions, right? We lost our pension. I didn't lose it. They took it away from me. In desperation to shut me down, and I was in a big depression for the last week, I must admit. I think I had a nervous breakdown too. I figured I'm going to be homeless, right? They took my pension away from me, and I still might be, but I'm not going to give up. I'm not going anywhere. This show's now back in business. We're back up and running. Period. I'm not going to be bullied, and I'll give a shout out to everybody that helped save this operation later on. I just want to address that because otherwise it's going to cloud my mind for the rest of the show. And it's a very humbling thing now, It always has been, but now it's even more humbling. So I need to raise $1,100 every month. Right now I'm good. Our bills are paid now for next month. So we're good. So somewhere in the next 2 or 3 weeks, we got to start raising money again to cover the next month. We're going to have to do that every month unless I can get a book published. We can get out doing lectures is one of my plans, right, in September. We'll raise enough to start doing that. Just be able to fund itself. And I'm trying all kinds of things to raise the money. I'm having no success, to start like little businesses. I'm doing everything I can to try to become independent because I can't comprehend losing the only show on the planet, the only educational program on the planet about the nuclear industry. Right, and we do forensic investigative journalism on top of that. We go and do field researches. And the beauty of everything, though, this can work really well, is because we have all the equipment. And now, over the last couple of years, we built a machine shop, which is I have an amazing machine shop. So I'm actually pretty talented for fixing things. I'm just, I'm not getting younger, right? But now, I got no options. Thank goodness we built that machine shop because we have a big fleet of equipment for research, for field studies. And I intend to push back. And I tend to be more, more methodical in telling these stories, articulating this catastrophic event we have going on and everything else. And I'm not going nowhere. This industry is not getting rid of me, period. I don't need a lot of help. I just need a little bit of help each month, and we can push back against this industry. This industry deserves to be held accountable, and the world deserves to understand and appreciate and be educated and make informed decisions about every facet of this industry. And we're capable of bringing that. And we're going to be going to war against this industry, even more so now that they've done that to me. They 100% have lost all my appeals. And I tried a few new routine. I've contacted them multiple times since we last done a show to try to reappeal it. But, the bureaucracy machine, I don't see any hope for that being restored. It's, it's unimaginable that they can take your pension away from you. I'm a threat to a very powerful industry. And I'm not going away. I don't give a shit. We have the whole operation put together. Why should we give up? We can maintain this. If we had 20 people donate $100 each every month, even if somebody donates $1,000, we still need 20 people to donate $100 because we do have to fund fuel and repairs and equipment and parts and oil and changes and filters and everything else for all the equipment. But if we can get 100 people to commit $100 a month, we can still manage every month to some people can't do it each month. So we'll still bring in, say, $1,100, $1,200 a month. That pays all the bills. Don't worry about me eating. I'll figure that one out. But we have the operation is safe, moving forward. I can keep up with almost all the repairs on my own. And now that we have YouTube, you can learn a lot more. So. I have plasma cutters and welders. I have a machine shop. We have an absurd amount of supplies gathered up just in case this had happened to me. This was always our biggest fear, right? So all of our fears has put us in a position where we can keep this happening. And until somebody replaces me, we need to keep this happening. And even if you replace me, I still want to keep pushing back, right? To me, it's vital that we do stuff like that. we can look anybody in the eyes and say, we're the good guys. We're the good guys and girls. Authorities dispatch specialists to security area. Let's get going again. Get all teary-eyed here in a minute. Security area collects samples to investigate the cause of death. Collect sample. The last people I'm going to trust is going to be the scientists, governments, and journalists and academics. And that's the saddest statement imaginable. And we have the documentation for that assertion, unfortunately, right? Mysteriously washes ashore, and these are conjectures, right? May be related to ship strikes. Didn't I just? Okay. I brought in that information, but I didn't use it. Or marine debris. Okay, so that's not what I wanted right away. This one here. There was another sailboat attacked by orca whales, by the way. And one of the reasons we're seeing that, because they're showing up in different places where they're not teaching it, they're not able to teach it to each other. It's not passed on that way, right? It could be they see the humans as a threat to their food source, right? Because they're struggling. Let's go back over to the other screen for a second. We'll get there. There have been about 1,200 reports of whales and boat collisions since a worldwide database launched in 2007, 3 years before Fukushima happened. The total number was 1,200. So you got 7,000 gray whales in 2022. Hang on, put it on the big screen. Yeah, the end of 2022 was a 40% drop in the Pacific gray whale. The crazies are investigating them. Oh, I'm sure they are. One primary suspect is food scarcity. The reason they're making those assertions is because the species were all emaciated, that they're finding the dead whales are emaciated. So in 2022, they went from a population of 27,000 in 2016 to 16,650. Which was 10,350 dead whales that they acknowledged. But it came out after there was another, well, that was because there was 7,000 whales showed up in another study. Oh, hang on, we'll get there. U.S. biologists probed the death of 70 emaciated gray whales. So that's not ship strikes they're talking about, that's starvation, right? But some of them died and got struck by a ship because they were an easy target. And then the whales in San Francisco Bay, think of it this statement where you have all these huge container ships coming in and out. So they're finding some whales there that have been hit by ships, but they're emaciated, but they've been hit by ships. They had starved to death and they're floating around, they get hit by a ship because they're in this huge traffic area in a harbor. Well, a bay, right? So it's multiple miles bigger, but it's still a bay. And the reason they're getting so many ship strikes in San Francisco Bay is because, first off, the whales never went there before, and the ones that are there are emaciated. They're starving to death. They're on their migratory route, and that's desperation. They're smelling the sewage and they're going in looking for food, and they're dying or getting hit by ships because they can't get out of the way. They're not healthy enough. And then there was another story. A marine heat wave caused 7,000 humpback whales to starve to death. So you had El Nino, you got heat waves, right? So they conflate this stuff. Scientists discovered 7,000 humpback whales, extra whales, on top of the unusual mortality event, were showing up emaciated. And we've covered, not 7,000, but we covered all the ones that we could find for all these years. And we're pretty good at finding them. Dead juvenile whale washes up on the shores near, this is this month's story, July the 10th, in Buenos Aires in Madrid. In Buenos Aires, just bear with me for a second here. Yeah, experts and whale research believe the carcass belonged to a juvenile of the endangered sea species. Now, there was 337 of them washed up in that same country, in Brazil. Was it Brazil? 2015. That was the biggest die-off of whales ever recorded in human history at that time. They migrate from Patagonia to Brazil. No pictures. Dead orca on the beach in Christchurch. I went back and grabbed that story. I didn't realize. I had it there earlier from the day. But we never seen that picture with, I don't think, with the rope around his tail, the emaciated, starving to dead animals. You can see the rib cage. Yeah, no, that was the same story. I just put that there in case I forgot to bring it in the preamble tonight. How crop protection is fueling the global decline of insects. How crop protection. So suggesting that pesticides is killing all the insects. Look at a satellite picture sometime of, say, British Columbia. And you see almost the entire country is forest. And fur. If you fly from Vancouver to Prince Rupert, you're going to be flying for about an hour and 20 minutes. It's 30,000 feet. And all you can see is endless fjords and inlets on the coastline, mountains, and forest. So there's no way that the farmer who's putting pesticides on his crops is going to contaminate the whole planet per se, right? So, yeah, it's very harmful to the local species. No, that's why they're using it, of course. But it's not gonna affect the entire ecosystem of the biosphere. See, the only thing that makes a plume that covers the whole planet is radioactive fallout. Radioactive emissions, carbon emissions, don't make plumes that cover, like gas, oil, and coal emissions, which is carbon, don't make plumes that covers the whole planet in 23 days, for instance. They don't make plumes that covers a little fraction of the planet. And wherever they land, you got more trees, more plants, more insects, more birds, more puppies. It's a good thing. Anthropogenic man-made radioactive fallout is the only emission where the plume is like an invisible snowstorm. Every species is breathing it in, and then they spend the rest of their life in proximity to it because it's electrically charged. So you can attach to their clothing, their hair, their vehicles, their handrails. It's transferred this way. The species, like dogs, pets will lick their feet, right? Cats and dogs lick their feet, and then you've seen this amazing amount of illnesses in pets, and that's because they're licking their feet, and the radiation is attached to their feet every time they come indoors. A new study from Macquarie University reveals the chemical, there are many different chemicals, is used globally to prevent fungal diseases, and it does, is damaging insect fertility and survival. Yeah, because that's what it's supposed to do. That's what its job is. It's not a side effect. That's what it's supposed to do. It's used globally to prevent it as damaging insects and their survival, because it's not like they didn't do the studies, but now they're finally acknowledging it. But when you read the stories, like, what? We didn't know it would do that. We thought it was only attack fungal disease. We didn't know it would kill all the insects. Well, they're local insects. But because people are locally talking about this on Facebooks and Twitters to their friends and families and stuff like that, and Instagram, the media wants them to share these stories, right, to allay their deepest and darkest nightmare. And they want to denigrate the fact that radioactive fallout exists and has these capacities. But this does it for several years. Radiation does it for millions of years. It ultimately snuffs out all life. You don't need a nuclear accident to eventually exterminate the whole planet. That's the ultimate outcome of 1,000 fuel pools with no containment. All of them are hemorrhaging radiation into the environment. A surprising decline in insect fertility. First off, this is not all new news. We've been talking about this for a minimum in the last decade when we covered the die-offs post-Fukushima. And die-offs from Fukushima were happening way early. Too much junk food tied to massive seabird die-off. Too much junk food. Remember that story? I threw a few stories in 2018. Now, there was a mass die-off in 2022 2023 or 2022 in the United States and Canada. There was 192 species of birds that died of starvation, insect-eating birds mostly. Well, it was 192 species. They were severe emaciation, had no body fat, no muscle mass. They ate that as an energy reserve, and they were dropping it into the sky over a very long distance and during their summertime migratory route. And we've covered that extensively. Those videos are still available on my site. Starvation as the cause of death between 250,000 and 500,000 Cassini auklets in 2014 to 2015. So late 2014, so in a 6-month period, the ultimate number was 1.4 million. Let me bring that headline back for you so you can check that story here. It's a really important story to have in your, ever recorded was starvation. Scientists now have the first definitive answer to what caused one of the largest die-offs ever recorded, starvation, and they blamed it on a shift in ocean conditions linked to changing climate, which is that's another garbage can diagnosis, right? All of these are post-Fukushima events. So we talk about this sometimes, that there was 1.4 million Cassini auklets was the total number estimated. And I mean, they were finding tens of thousands on a single beach, which was just inconceivable pre-Fukushima. Starvation is the cause of death between 250,000 and 500,000 Cassini auklets. These are microscopic eaters. Their source is aquatic zooplankton, and they also eat some krill and copepods and stuff like that. But generally, they're microscopic animals. But at the same time, there was over 1.1 million common murres. They were showing up at the exact same time in the same areas. And they feed on anchovies and squid and sardines and krill, like, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-inch herring probably, and a few other smaller species, right? So you had two different spectrums of the food chain showing up severely emaciated on the migratory route in the same year, at the same time. One ate, the keystone species, the anchovies, squid, sardines, krill, and everything, which are like big shrimp. They live up to 10 years. And they just don't reproduce. And that's why they're disappeared basically now, except for a small fraction. And the Cassini auklets eat microscopic animals. Two different spectrums of the food chain showing up emaciated at the same time. That's where we're in the middle of a major extinction level event. And the media is very good at pretending that there's other reasons. We look at all the reasons. Like we accept there could be other reasons. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is post-Fukushima, and it has the emblematic symptoms and documentation of a broken food chain caused by an event that happened in 2011. You can trace it all back to 2011, and the big event was Fukushima. It never stopped melting down. So, in aquatic zooplankton. But this is such an important story. Was found to be smaller, less abundant, forcing seabirds to eat less nutritional junk food. So they were saying the species weren't as big as the zooplankton weren't as abundant or as big. And so the Cassini auklets, these are very tiny birds, by the way, the Cassini auklets were eating what they call less nutritious junk food instead of nutrient and energy-rich prey. That the same prey that was normally nutrient and energy-rich is now less nutritious. So it's a pretty dishonest way to describe what had happened. Welcome to the nuclear industry. After the auklets, the Cassini auklet die-off, 4 more mass mortality events involving seabirds took place, occurring farther north each time: Muirs, puffins, and more recently short-tailed shearwater. Northern fulmar in the Arctic experienced a similar fate as the auklets as far north as the Chukchi Sea. And the Cassini auklet story is really an opener of a saga of multiple seabird die-offs that are unprecedented. And back then, you never heard the avian influenza invoked, for instance, right? For years and years, we have an incredible amount of die-off post-Fukushima where they didn't invoke I just got to save that story in my unusual mortality event folder. It'll only take me a second. My apologies. Right there will be fine. Yeah, I have multiple folders because there's so many unusual mortality events. All right, here we go. I'll put it right there. We have so many species die off for so long. Now, we've done an absurd amount of field studies. Gray whale death reached, and I'll show you some of that later. Gray whale deaths reach decade high in bay areas because, first off, they're in a very high traffic zone, right? San Francisco Bay. They've never there before. Suspected vessel strike. Now, I showed you there was a total of 1,200 strikes pre-Fukushima worldwide. Not all of them would have died, right, from the encounter with the ships. Cause of death on determined, he said July 21st was an orca killed the whale in San Francisco Harbor, where they don't belong. Why would he kill a whale when they have all kinds of, they eat 300 species? Why would he work so hard? And usually with the whales, they only eat the tongue. So why? It's an enormous effort to kill a big whale, by the way. It takes like an hour and a half or something for them to drown the whale. That's how they kill it ultimately. They'll drown it. Suspected vessel strike. Suspected, right? That's a conjecture. Etc., etc. Cause of death undetermined, undetermined, undetermined. These were emaciated, all of them. Possible vessel strike. Again, that's a conjecture. Suspected vessel interaction. That's a conjecture. It's an opinion. Suspected, probable. Again, how difficult is it to assert that there was a vessel strike? All of these are opinions and conjectures. Ultimately, the ones that cause of death that are undetermined, we have pictures of lots of them. It's severe emaciation. They had starved to death. More than 35 individual gray whales were photo-identified swimming within the bay in 2025, compared to 6 in 2024, and none pre-Fukushima in San Francisco Bay. There might have been one here and there wandered in, but it was usually like a young teenager or something. Unusual mortality event that left right away. Unusual mortality event that occurred along the west coast 2019-2023. The population of eastern North Pacific gray whale dropped 45%. The numbers are 52%. It's 14,000 dead, 13,000 left. All of them were emaciated last year in the migratory route. And when I say that to people, and I do that a lot lately, there's no response. It's like they look at you, and it doesn't go in their head at all. It's like talking to a zombie. Oh, that's good. I know yesterday, like, there was 20,000 people, and there's no birds. There's food everywhere. People are dropping all kinds of scraps, and kids are throwing stuff, and food. There's food everywhere. You're stepping on it. And there's no birds, they're scavenging. Nothing. There's no finches, no sparrows, no robins, there's no crows, there's no seagulls. There is crows and seagulls left, but they weren't there. There was nothing in the water. There's a big lake there. There was not a single, it was absurd. And I said to two different people, I said, there's no birds. And one of them said to me, oh, they're down by the ocean. I said, okay, yeah. I'm not going to try to have a conversation with somebody that says something like that to me. No critical thinking skills. Bad week for Kodiaks migrating gray whales. Look at them emaciated. Holy smokes, eh? You'd be surprised at how many of these whales are alive when they come ashore, but you look at it and you were like, there's no way that was alive when it came ashore. But the stories typically, a lot of them will tell you that they were alive, right? 2025 total of dead grey whales found in Kodiak nearby islands now reach nearly a dozen. It's Alaska, right? No birds on the beach, no birds in the water. No grizzly bears, no tracks. Orca who carried her dead newborn 1,000 miles gives birth to a new calf. That's how it was done. I don't know if this one is healthy. I can't remember this story. The killer whale captured hearts across the world in 2018. I was on the ocean when that was happening, doing research expeditions. For refusal to let go of her dead calf, has given birth to her second baby in the last 4 years. Her last one died, was born emaciated. Given the calf the alphanumeric designation J61. They said contamination in the water, large concern for the killer whale population. Well, in 2014, I think it was, they were suggesting that killer whales by 2020 would have 1,000 atoms per kilogram of cesium, which means they're going to get leukemia. And radioactive fallout is considered a chemical, so in one sense, they're being honest, but in the reality of it, it's a completely dishonest and deceptive thing to say. A hungry whale caused chaos in Wimsley in Sydney Harbour. A hungry whale. And that's a really interesting connotation to put there this morning, and good for her. Well, whales typically don't hang out there, by the way. But you can, as soon as you see that very definition, sharp spinal definition, that's emaciation. The only thing causes that to happen is severe emaciation. The whales are very round, like they're 12 inches of blubber. Like, you'd be surprised how much. If I take a 12 inch by 12 inch and 12 inch deep cubic foot of blubber off a healthy whale, it's heavy as shit. You wouldn't believe how heavy that weighs. It's not every day your commute gets upstaged by a whale. On Wednesday, it's not every day, right? No, it's not normal at all. On Wednesday morning, the ferries came to a sudden halt. So this was a big story because normally they don't have whales there. They're migratory whales. You have all, you're talking about Australia, so you have the Great Barrier Reef. You have 1,000 mile of paradise for the whales. Why would it go in the harbour, see? And because they're on their migratory route, they're traveling together. A hungry whale, yeah, a starving whale is more like it. Ominous blood-like substance off the Australian coast after 9,000 animals dying. That was this month, the 11th of July, 2025. Now, so what happens is because the first thing that happened with the radioactive fallout was, particularly like the Pacific Ocean, it's true now for all freshwater and oceans, is you wiped out the majority of the phytoplankton. The phytoplankton is 50% of the oxygen 50-something% of the oxygen on the planet is produced by the phytoplankton in the Pacific Ocean. And so when you take that out of the equation, the oxygen out of the water, what happens? You create a perfect storm for domoic acid and algae and everything else. Well, it's the only outcome that you would expect. Damaged gill tissues leading to suffocation of marine mammals. Suffocation. Yeah, because the oxygen producer machine was wiped out by the radioactive fallout. The phytoplankton, in a glass of water, salt water, would typically have 75 to 100 million phytoplankton. That's the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain. So it's the most important thing. It's 50% of the oxygen on the planet. Once you take the oxygen out of the ocean, suffocation events is going to be magnified and is going to be common, affecting ecosystems along approximately 150 kilometers of coastline. Well, that's popular coastline, see? Large blooms can deplete the oxygen in the water as they die and decay, leading to fish, which was true pre-Fukushima. But what we're seeing now is it's prolific. There's that word again. Hundreds of marine animals died and washed up on shores. There was many different species. So very transient species too, right? Like a dolphin is a very transient. Now that dolphin does not look healthy to me, by the way. And the ray fish themselves with the mouth on the bottoms, they're bottom feeders typically, right? Sharks has impacted a wide range, including fish, sharks, rays, invertebrates, like shrimp, and even iconic species like the leafy sea dragon. Toxins that cause paralytic shellfish poisoning blamed for the Alaska seal death. And I can show you a dozen stories of depleted oxygen each day, basically. A die-off last year, it was blamed for the seal deaths. But just because they blamed it don't mean it's true, see? Well, because we've been documenting for many years that the die-off of the seals and sea lions in particular has clearly been easy to attribute it to starvation. So these kinds of poisonings, if the animals are healthy looking, if they're really plump, they don't have any wrinkles whatsoever, then and they're dead, then yes, you can blame the algae. But if their body conditions are very unhealthy, they're thin looking, they have a lot of wrinkles, and we're seeing wrinkles. And we can bring in the zoom here in a second. Bear with me. Here we go. So when I zoom in on these animals, I'm seeing unhealthy animals. I'm not seeing great big plumb animals. So these are seals and sea lions. So when you see them, normally you would think, your thought is when you see one on a rock is if he loses his balance, he's just going to roll right down because he's like a big ball. He's really healthy, right? Because that's your normal thought. These animals, look how you can see all these wrinkles over and over and over, which means they're not healthy. It takes a long time to lose all that weight. So trying to blame, in this particular circumstance, blame an algae. Yes, they probably died of the algae, don't get me wrong, but they were dying already, is what I'm saying to you, right? They were starving. They were suffering from... They shouldn't have any wrinkles. They should be really, really plump. Even when they're born, they should be really plump. They're very symmetrical. They're very so-called, like a tube, but they're round, right? So when you're not seeing that, then any kind of wrinkles at all is not normal for a healthy animal. There should be no wrinkles. Maybe a walrus, a big walrus, but like a really big, like a male maybe. For the first time, scientists have made a definitive link between the toxins produced by algae causing shellfish poisoning and marine mammal for the first time. So they're conflating it. It's not true. These animals are starving to death. They're very malnourished, and a lot of them are clearly emaciated. It was the clearest evidence ever found for this type of toxin-caused deaths. It's the first time they ever they conflated it. They equated it. The industry is looking for the blame game. Blame anything but the nuclear industry. And so these are usually coordinated stories, by the way, by the International Atomic Energy Agency. A type of algae that produces Saxon toxin is becoming more prevalent in these bodies of water. Yeah, because you got rid of the phytoplankton that produces the oxygen that would regulate the heat in the water. Marine researchers concerned over uptick in whale deaths in San Francisco Bay. Well, if they were concerned, then they would be honest and acknowledge that the whales are emaciated. Conditions have ranged from normal to emaciated. So how can you have the gray whale population, which they acknowledge is emaciated, everyone that they're seeing. So even suggesting for a second that there's healthy whales migrating 12,000 miles and migrating another 12,000 miles this year, were emaciated last year, or emaciated this year, but there's still some that are healthy. So is there whales that are hogging the food, or bullies won't let the other whales eat? Or is it more likely that all the whales are emaciated? It's more likely, not more likely, it's for sure. It's not, there's no room here for maybe. If the majority of the population is emaciated, confirmed, which they confirm now over the last couple of months, in particular for the grey whales. We're seeing it symmetrically in all species, by the way, of whales, and seals and sea lions and many other species. And one of the earlier headlines post-Fukushima, the first few years, they talked a lot about the bioaccumulation in sea mammals, and whales and seals and everything else. And so they were alluding and even acknowledging that you would get 1,000+ atoms per kilogram of body mass. That's leukemia. So they have cancer. They're producing more white blood cells than red blood cells. And so eventually they will die. They won't be able to uptake, even if there's food there, they won't be able to uptake nutrition. And you can't have half of the migratory emaciated and the other half not. It just doesn't work that way. It unfortunately doesn't work that way. Alarming discovery in Zarat, another dead whale. This is a river way interior in Buenos Aires, where we talked about earlier, some of the whales dying up there earlier. Another specimen in similar condition this was, I think, 3 in less than a week. Just a week after the grim discovery of a lifeless whale, another one was found floating in the waters of the Parana River. And I think I've got pictures, coming up of the city area. So it's in a river near the city of Zarat. And Zarat, Buenos Aires. So it's ultimately way up a river. There's more coming up here in a second. It marks the 3rd dead whale in the last 2 weeks. Now, I'm not sure right here if it might show up here in a second, but I can't remember if all of these were found way upriver. They're way upriver. I think don't quote me, but I believe they're around 15 miles away from the ocean. Several hours from the ocean, crossing a considerable stretch of fresh water to reach that section of the Parana River. One of the circulating earlier versions suggests the whales may have swum for several hours from the ocean to get way up that river in fresh water. Now, I don't think it's way up there, right, where I just think there might be another place there with the same name. You see that in Canada sometimes, right? Same name in different parts of the country. But this is the river. They had somehow or another, they got way up this river. The hypothesis highlights the unusual route of the whale and raises questions about the factor that led it so far up the river. Well, they don't travel up a river. And a few years back, we had covered 3 or 4 stories in a week of whales showing up way up these rivers. This is stuff we've never seen pre-Fukushima. One of them was in Montreal, Canada, which is just hundreds and hundreds of miles. Nobody in Montreal, Quebec, had ever seen a whale in their history up there. And it died, right? And the pictures we got from it was an emaciated whale. Just 5 days earlier, July the 9th, another whale was found dead by a fisherman at kilometer 18 of the coastal canal. So 18 kilometers up the canal, they had found another dead whale. I think this story was translated. And then that's how I ended up finding it. 3 whales found dead in Orkney stranding. This is United Kingdom, I would imagine. Despite a noticeable bloating after lying out in the sun, the team found the whales had all been healthy, but had not been feeding recently. Such a strange thing to say. Pre-Fukushima, you would never see connotations like this. Had all been healthy. That's what he said about the whale up in Christchurch, up in New Zealand, rather. In the story I covered earlier, the killer whale. But ultimately, the killer whale was a severe emaciation, right? Even some of the headlines, I didn't have them, but it wasn't the last show and the show before, rather. Or last show. You would have found the rest of those headlines. Because we covered, this is 3 shows of die-offs we've done in a short period of time. Like of the actual news cycle, recent news cycles. They had all been healthy, though they had not been feeding recently. If they're not feeding recently, then they're not healthy. They're starving. They're usually found at 800 feet below sea level, where there's no predators, where there are no predators feeding on squid. So why would they mention, what species feeds on them? Because that's what, right? Because that's a very confusing connotation there. They're usually found 800 feet below the sea where there's no predators. So suggesting predators might have forced them up on the rocks. It's just, but they give you, let me get out of the way for a second. You can't really tell with that picture. They are bloated. The tail looks incredibly thin. Right? Oh yeah, you can see that shape right there, the thin. Let me back up, I'm sorry. So they're emaciated. But they're as they described it, they're bloated. Noticeable bloating. They had not been feeding recently. And that's very evident in the picture of their tail. Their tail is literally just bone, is all you see in there. Mystery is 6 gray whales found dead after unusual high influx into San Francisco Bay. Well, it was a mystery 7 years ago, 8 years ago, when he first started going in there, because they'd never been there before. That was a mystery. This mystery is, well, so they got pictures, and that picture is an emaciated, the back part of the whale is clear emaciation. They have beautiful pictures for everything else, but when it comes to the marine species die-off, it's always crappy pictures. The gray whale, 14 gray whale, 1 mink whale have died in 2025, San Francisco, with the cause of 3 of the gray whales determined to be suspect or probable. Suspect or probable. Why can't you assert they were struck by the ship? Why at a 14 would you focus on 3 of them? What about the rest of them? What did they die of? Why you just focus on the 3 and you make an assertion, right, an unfounded assertion of a vessel strike? The Academy wrote in a press release Thursday, the Academy and the partners at the center have not responded. Just what? 2019 was 14 individuals. Really? Individuals. And 2021 was 15. 2010 there was none. 2009 there was none. 1900 there was none. Post-Fukushima, there's endless emaciated dead whales in San Francisco Bay on the migratory route of those particular species. However, the cause of death of the other whales who died are undetermined. Well, boy, what are you talking about? We have pictures of them, actually. They're emaciated. Which is the norm. It's normal. They starved to death. That's normal. That's the new normal. And it's only normal post-Fukushima. So ultimately, when all of these incredible, heartbreaking things are all post-Fukushima, what are you left with? However, they're all, they closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom after Chernobyl, 3,000 kilometers away. Because it's not like a banana, it's not like a potato chip, it's not like walking in sunshine. However, there have been unusual high numbers of sightings around the bay since Fukushima. This year was 33 individual gray whales. They say more than 5 times the number of whales that were sighted last year. Well, how many times? It's 33 more than was sighted in 2010, the year before Fukushima. It's 33 more than 2009, 2 years before Fukushima. It's 33 more then the decade before that, and the decade before that, and the decade before that, and the decade before that. Researchers are still working to determine what's driving the massive spike in sightings. Researchers. And they're so vague, they don't give you any. Only 5 mothers and a calf pair were identified in Laguna San, where wintering whales gathered, which has nothing to do with San Francisco Bay, by the way. Dozens of gray whales have died along the Mexico, Baja, California Peninsula, which is where they go to have their babies. There was no surviving babies last year that made it to Baja California, Mexico, and there was none. There was 88 or 80 born this year, and they're not in very good shape. They're emaciated. One of the main causes of death for the whales on both coasts are vessel strikes. I showed you earlier NOAA's numbers for 2007. The total numbers all the way up into 2007, worldwide, not just United States, but worldwide, was around 1,200. Not all of them would have died, right? And so, but you will see that connotation in almost every single story, that conjecture, that covers the straw man argument will be put into every story. Minke whale that spent several days, so it was alive, Long Beach Harbor, has died. And when you see that really thin, right, that's emaciation. And you can see it in the head. It's hard to spot right there. But the head is concaved. That's the proverbial peanut head. It's not a very big whale. But generally, they're not very big, but they are a lot bigger than the whale we're seeing, right? So you can see there you have a very smooth head. They don't have that concaved heads. And they don't have that really thin tail, the sharp spine. Let's go back to the picture one more time for a second for you. They don't have a sharp tail, spinal like on their tail. So when you see this tail here, you can see the definition stands out. That's why I'm making those particular assertions for you. One question is whether the whale was affected by domoic acid. Like, that was never mentioned all the way up until 2017 or so, domoic acid. And when they did the test, we followed those reports when they finally came out with them a year or two later, 3 years later sometimes. It was never domoic acid, which is a toxin produced by a lack of oxygen in certain algae, right, that are grown because of lack of oxygen. The definition of the spine right there is what you will find when you see emaciated whales. Same with that peanut head. And so when they don't give you close-up shots, despite the fact that they're close-up, he even has a camera in his hand. When you can't get it, when they don't give you that close-up shot, when you see these types of definitions, front and back, then, you know, I'm not going to pretend that they're not emaciated. Polar bear gons on dead sperm whale in the Arctic, in the ice. Now that sperm whale is not a very healthy looking sperm whale. And the polar bear is not extra healthy, but he's not too bad. There are seagulls there, which is awesome, but it's pretty unusual to see them. We have the 46 million migratory seabirds here, the biggest migratory spot on the planet, they come here to raise their fledglings. So we're at ground zero, right? Nothing. And it's just, the cliffs are, because they've been millions of generations coming here to raise their fledglings. So they might have 2 or 3 or 4 babies, right, in each nest. And so there should be 150 to 200 million birds will fly out of here in the fall, basically, right? We're not seeing that. Like, the work I'm doing has to be done. And the government should be supporting me. There should be big foundations supporting me. I'm actually a good guy. I know it don't seem that way when you listen to all the propaganda about me out there. I mean, people say the most horrible things about me. But I knew that when I went public. And the reason I went public, was because, I was reading all these comments, and I started having pains of conscience because everybody was begging the world to do something. Will somebody please do something? Or will somebody please say something? And I launched the research. I said, you know what? I was reading so many comments. It was like every second, third comment was like that. And, because you have the pro-nuclear, and then you have people being realistic. I said, what the hell? They're gonna wreck me anyway, right? I said, I might as well go public. And because I want to be I felt that if I went public, my face, my name, and everything, it's harder. I've got a big target now on my forehead, my back for the rest of my life, and I didn't realize how big that target actually was. And I'm just trying to do the moral and ethical thing, and I felt that the world. I'm not afraid of this industry. I shouldn't say that. I am afraid of the industry. They've brutalized me over the years, but I'm not afraid to sacrifice everything for this planet and for the species. I'm not. I'm committed. I'm 100% committed. I'm 100% dedicated to it, 100% of the time. This is my life. This is my soul, what I do every day. This is what I do all day, every day. Everything is about, especially this time of year, doing field studies, gathering documentation, information, hoping you're wrong, trying to prove yourself wrong, and ultimately proving a terrible story. It's a terrible story, see? But I felt the world deserved somebody. I thought that if I ran an educational program, I'm not trying to say Big Shot Dane or something, it's not like that at all. There's a total different reason. I said, I'm very informed about the nuclear industry, and I can come out and educate the population. And that will encourage bloggers and other people that normally won't tackle this subject to provide them with the documentation, right, so that if they did tackle this subject, they would have the moral high ground, right? They would have the documentation that was incontestable, unassailable information. And I still bring that, and that's why, instead of doing a radio show, which a lot of the propaganda will do a radio show, there's no documentation, make crazy assertions, right? It's really easy to sit there and just yak for 2 hours for a radio show. It's a whole different level to bring you perpetual documentation. And a lot of my assertions, the majority of my assertions are typically backed up with documentation, but I earned the right to make the assertion without the documentation. But the problem is I can't run an educational program without providing a stupid amount of documentation. And the problem with the documentation is it takes time to tell the story, right? Okay, so let's go back to this story. I just want to make some things clear because what they've done to me recently, taking my pension away from me and forcing me, literally giving me a nervous breakdown, was try to, psychologically wreck me, I guess. Congratulations work, but with my type of personality, they should have known better because I'm just going to double down. I'm going to come back twice as vigorous, and I'm going to be more informative, more dedicated, if that's even conceivable, and I'm going to work a lot harder. I'm not going away. And if you kill me, I'm still never going to go away because I produced absurd amount of documentation over the last decade in particular. I will never go away. And we should be so lucky they do kill me. The world might actually wake up, be forced to wake up because the world will respond appropriately with such an egregious act. I'm a good person. I have the moral high ground. There's nobody in the nuclear industry can publicly debate me. They can't win that debate ever. And no matter how smart they are, how many of them are. They want 20 academics, nuclear scientists, marine experts, and then on one side of the table, Dana on the other side, let's bring it on. I can prove my assertions flawlessly over and over under any kind of pressure. I thrive under pressure. Unfortunately, for them, I'm under enormous amount of pressure now. That's a good thing for this planet. He suspects a toxic algae bloom, conjecture and opinion, could have disoriented the whales and caused it to swim up on the beach. So, like, these people are insane. The minke whale are no strangers. They're more elusive, he said, than humpbacks. So he figures it has to be a toxic algae bloom, which is the typical garbage can diagnosis that made it come up on the beach. In the last week, Peyton says there have been reports of dead porpoise, a dead seal, 2 dead otters, 2 dead whales, and now another stranded whale that died. There might be, opinion, a large harmful algae bloom event. Well, it's caused because you killed the phytoplankton. It's very realistic. It is happening. It is a catastrophic to the species. It's simply real. But what causes it was the extermination of the phytoplankton in 2011, post-Fukushima. Tsunami. No, that's up. Is that up by the tsunami, rather? We're already through all those stories. I got to go to the other screen for this story. Caspian seawater levels dropped to historical lows, says scientists. And it's the biggest inland body of water on the planet, I believe, is it? The Caspian Sea. Now, this is caused, like these inland waters, they produce a lot of weather patterns for that part of the country, that continent. And so you'll have hundreds and hundreds of miles of rain clouds each day being built over these in massive bodies of water. And that'll carry water to the interior, right? But the problem is the radioactive fallout wiped out the bacteria and the fungus on your landmass, which is not a very big part of your planet. And it's perpetually under siege. You can't recover because we always got radioactive fallout now. We got 1,000 fuel pools hemorrhaging it all day, and Fukushima is still melting down. We have all this dumped into the ocean. We have the perfect evil Alexa of concoction of nuclear after 80 years of a perpetual. But Fukushima was a pulse event, and it could have been upwards of at least 36 reactors. It could have been way more. It could have been 50 or 60 reactor cores, pure uranium plutonium that were lost, atomized and aerosoled. Specialists, let's go back to the other screen because it's better for me and you. Specialist Fishery Research Institute, the Caspian water levels fell to more than 29 meters below the Baltic Sea. I'm not sure what the number starts out at. It typically hovers at 26, 27, I think it was. Yeah. This is where the retreating sea is exposing large areas of the seabed. It is also where the biologically rich, densely populated ecosystems are located. So Japan's radioactive fallout since the Caspian Sea has been receding at an alarming pace since 2015. So 2011, we had a significant event. So there's a couple of reasons. You lost the glaciers, so you don't have the typical runoff into the Caspian Sea. And you only have snowpack in the winter. If you don't get a lot of snowpack, then you're not going to have a lot of runoff, right? But the radioactive fallout, this is the French government cesium-137. There's many, many different studies. This is a study. This was a spike of 1 million, 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air covering the entire planet in less than 23 days of cesium-137, which pulses energy 600 feet. Now, because that's a gamma, you're going to have alphas, neutrons, and betas in that same plume and the same amounts, right? These are unheard of, unimagined amounts pre-Fukushima. So you have all this radioactive fallout on the ground in the air. Now, cesium in particular pulses 600 feet every second. This is a pulse of energy, an explosion for each atom. Think of a snowstorm where every snowflake pulses energy 600 feet in every direction every second. The snow never melts, and it never stops snowing. And then apply that to 80 years of the nuclear industry, and now you're starting to be pretty honest with how bad of a shape we're actually in. And what it done was, because it's in the fields, you got gammas and alphas and neutrons and betas. They all explode every second, almost at the speed of light. Every second. Pulsing energy, pure energy, almost at the speed of light. And so when they hit each other, gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas, they don't mesh. It's known in the French. There's a German word for Bremsstrahlung, and what it means, we call it an X-ray. So you have two pulses of energy, almost at the speed of light, gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas. It don't matter when they hit each other, which is because you got all these ricochets. Because you got gammas and alphas hitting each other, ricocheting, hitting neutrons and betas, ricocheting, hitting alphas and everything else. And these are all these ricochets, almost at the speed of light. Two objects almost at the speed of light hitting each other creates another effect known as an X-ray. So all the species in the meadows and your forests are full body X-rays, no exclusions. Every snail, and so in your forest you have this ecosystem that breaks down foliage and litter. So the dead plants and species and everything, they fall on the forest floor or the meadows. And there's all these microscopic animals, just absurd amount of microscopic different species. And they live in harmony with fungus and bacteria. And fungus and bacteria retain water. And you need that water to break down the foliage. But you also need the biota. But the biota is dependent upon the fungus and the bacteria and the water that they retain in your forests and your meadows and your ecosystem. So we wiped that out, and we knew this from Chernobyl, where we have a lot of studies about that kind of effect. But now we're seeing it planet-wide. And what happens now are two very significant things. Because you don't have the biota, the microscopic animals, the fungus and the bacteria to break down the foliage and the litter anymore, what happens is it becomes tinder dry. The earth is not soaking up water, so it's soaking up heat. And it's tinder dry. You can go out and stick a shovel in and it's like dust. You'll still find a big ant's nest out in the forest, but there's no ants. Right? There should be 500,000 spiders per acre tied onto trees, the tips of trees and bushes and everything else. If you find them, you'll find them on rocks, and they'll be deformed. The webs will be, and there'll be nothing or very little in the webs. Normally you would check the spider webs wherever you go immediately to see what species were in that area, insects. So now when you have lightning strikes, you have tinder dry. You have this tinder that's dry instead of soaking wet with fungus and bacteria and biota. It's tinder dry, it floats up, right? And it floats maybe 100 feet or 1,000 feet. When it lands again, it's still a big ball of fire. And now you start another forest fire 1,000 feet that way, a couple 100 feet this way, 500 feet that way. And when you have lightning strikes, you're setting off these forest fires now everywhere, because you might not have you have all these intense forest fires because you don't have the biota to break down the foliage and the litter. And now we have this time, 14 years later, all this biota now hasn't broken down. You're getting these massive and we predicted that way back in the day that we might start seeing this insane amount of forest fires. And the forest, of course, sequesters radioactive fallout and liberates it back into the environment as in the smoke, but as also as radioactive fallout again. Some of this stuff is sequestered for 40, 50, 60, 70 years. So the atomic bomb, radioactive fallout covering the entire planet, is being reliberated, not just through the forest, but through the glaciers that are melting. You're having huge pulse when a glacier melts. You have this pulse events up in these pristine environments of radioactive fallout that was sequestered in the ice. And the other effect you're getting is because the earth is tinder dry, it doesn't soak up water. So now you have flash floods. And so if you look at the decade or two before, if you go back pre-nuclear industry, it's better. But if you look at the decades before Fukushima pulse event and the decade after, you're going to see that trend of massive forest fires that are completely out of control and floods, flash floods, because it doesn't soak up into the ground. And so once enough of it falls to start the river, so-called, on the landmass, you're washing away also at the same time the surface soil, which is very important for plants. So the roots become exposed. They don't have any bacteria or fungus to protect them. Caspian Sea has receded at alarming pace since 2015 because it's not getting glacier water anymore, with water levels falling by nearly 80 centimeters over the past 5 years. And over such a big mass of water, because it's the biggest, scientists blame the drop in the combination, the garbage can diagnosis, which leads to more evaporation. Well, the more evaporation is because the ground is not soaking up the water. So instead of running down to the Caspian Sea all the time, it's able to flood areas, right? It just rushes past it. And a reduced inflow of water from rivers that feed the sea. A reduced inflow from rivers that feed the sea. Because the glaciers, because the Volga and the Ural mountains are not producing glacier water, and they're not producing runoff. Because the runoff, the typical runoff in a healthy forest is very subtle, right? You have all these streams and estuaries. They're 1,000-year lake beds and stuff like this are now being, the water would normally find its way down through to, the morning dew, the perspiring of the ecosystem, everything else. Now you're having flash floods. And so it can run in any direction, huge amounts of it. And once it got momentum during the rain, instead of it being eventually diverted where you normally expect it, is not. And reduced inflow of water from rivers that feed the sea, particularly the Volga and the Ural Mountains. The Volga has a length of 3,500 kilometers, 2,200 mile lake, so to speak, and a catchment area of 1.36 million square kilometers, 530,000 square miles. It's Europe's largest river in terms of average discharge at the delta and of drainage basins. Is widely regarded as the national river of Russia. And the Ural Mountains, because you got Mayak is up in the Urals, right? The reprocessing disease factory. Simply the Urals are a mountain range in Eurasia. They run south and north, mostly through Russia, from the coast of the Arctic Ocean to the river, and again, that's why we're talking about glaciers, and to the river Ural in northwestern Kazakhstan, which was devastated by the nuclear industry, right? The highest peak of the Urals is 6,200 feet elevation. It was identified in 1927. The Volga River, which originated in Russia, supplies 80% of the Caspian water, is increasingly strained by dam construction and expansions of irrigation systems. A lot of that water goes right back into the rivers. It's not like it's retaining it. The water, like the dams are released for hydroelectric and stuff like that. So you can't blame it on something like that, is all I'm saying. The shrinking water level poses a serious threat to the Caspian fragile ecosystem, which is already devastated due to the radioactive fallout, right? Including endangered species like sturgeons and Caspian seals. Well, the seals in the Caspian Sea, we've covered the die-offs of them quite a bit, were starved to death, were emaciated. And the Volga River is the longest river in Europe, 3,500 kilometers. I got some pictures for you too, so you can kind of get some visuals in a second. It's fed by snow. No, it was fed by ice pack. It was fed by glaciers. Now it's fed by snow. That's why it's dropped, because it's dependent every winter now on having a snow. But because the Earth is getting tinder dry because of the radioactive fallout, had destroyed the ecosystem itself, right? The function of our ecosystem, the breakdown of foliage, the litter, and the dead insects and everything. We destroyed that, and so it doesn't retain water. Underground water, 30%, rainwater, 10%. But the rainwater is caused typically, it's just a recycle where it makes hundreds of miles of clouds every day, rain clouds, and that hits the mountains. It loses a chunk of its payload before it can get over the mountain, right? And so that payload would typically feed the biodiversity in the ecosystem, landmass, but now because the landmass is tinder dry, it's running off. And now it doesn't do the things it's supposed to do. So these are different pictures of the Urals. You can see the big ships on this big body of water. And so yes, there's absolutely dams. Yes, they're growing food. They always have. They've been growing food. Like there's been 110 billion, 120 billion people on this planet before we got here. That's the statistics anyway. And so these are huge rivers. And if you make a dam, you got to let it back into the river. You can't you're not just going to keep it there. Let's keep her going here. Hello, everybody. Let me just take a boost through the comment section right quickly. Yeah, I seen Colin talking about seafood, halibut. Like I've given this a lot of thought over the years. And you're not going to get away from radioactive food, that's for sure. So here's my take on it, and you can disagree with me, and everybody has the right to, right? Seafood bioaccumulates radiation 125,000 times more than a fish like a halibut or a codfish does. So let me repeat that again. Shellfish, like clams and mussels and oysters, they're filter feeders. And so I would rather eat, how would I put it? I would rather eat 100 pounds of halibut or codfish, or even 1,000 pounds of halibut and codfish, rather, than I would eat 1 pound or 2 pounds of shellfish. Because shellfish is bioaccumulates it. If you eat a big bowl of shellfish, then you could end up with leukemia next week or the week after, or worse. And so cows are bioaccumulating it from eating the radioactive plants from the nuclear fallout, right? We can't escape it. So I wouldn't feel guilty if I was you to eat some fish or some halibut or anything like that. I would avoid at all costs, even to the point of arguing or a fist fight, having my loved ones eating shellfish. I'm not saying eat seafood all day, every day, or something like that. I'm just telling you, if you love it and you miss it and you want to have a meal, for goodness sakes, don't feel guilty, because your biggest concern is shellfish and berries is another big concern, because berries are brutal bioaccumulation, and mushrooms, like fungus. Stay away from that type of food, particularly mushrooms. Mushrooms are the worst. They attract radiation and they can handle it, but you can't. And so if you eat mushrooms and shellfish and berries for dessert, you could really damage permanently your health. It might take a few months or years to manifest. And but we've studied this a lot, okay? You can't avoid the radiation. If you're eating plants or you're eating meat or whatever the case may be, you're better off eating halibut and a codfish, for instance, or a snapper, because it's not going to have steroids and antibiotics, and it's not going to be, traumatized. It's not going to have all this adrenaline in it when it's, when they sacrifice the animal for the table, right? Whereas a fish and codfish and halibut, stuff like that, well, let me put it this way. Again, I would rather eat 1,000 pounds of codfish and halibut than a couple of pounds of shellfish. There's zero possibility you'll get me to eat shellfish. It's not happening. Because of the way it's 125,000 times. And so if you enjoy seafood, stick with the big fish. Don't eat a lot of it. But don't worry about it too much, because you can't avoid it. It's everywhere. We covered, we buried the whole planet in it. But if you want to avoid mushrooms, you want to avoid shellfish, you want to avoid berries, you want to avoid this, right, with the bioaccumulation of the aggregators, which is the fungus like mushrooms, the shellfish. I miss oysters, I miss scallops, I miss abalones, I miss mussels and stuff like that. As for shrimp and prawns, I don't know. But when it comes to codfish and halibut, I'm at the point where I'm not going to worry about it. I will eat some of it. I won't eat, under any circumstances, mushrooms, shellfish, and berries, for instance. And I should make up a list of what I won't eat, right? And then put it in one of my buffers so that I can bring it up on the page so people can get a screen capture. Avian influenza, not the cause of the mass bird deaths in Coral Bay, says authorities. I think that's Australia's story too, don't quote me. Yeah, Western Australia authorities ruled out avian influenza and other reportable diseases as being behind the bird deaths. Right? It's not too often we hear descending voices. Other countries, for the same birds, will blame it on avian influenza, right? And most of these tests are going to the exact same laboratories. Like the Canadian government, the United States government, has government laboratories, and that's where you're getting those connotations, right? Now, the avian influenza has existed for millions of generations. They've never jumped to species. But the species' immune systems are now compromised. And the majority of species we're able to definitively show are dying of starvation, particularly the insect-eating species, because they bioaccumulate so much more. That's why like spiders are notorious for bioaccumulation of 1,000% more than other species in the same forest, because they liquefy the insects and they bioaccumulate the radiation. So a study was done on just radioactive, I think it was radioactive iron or something stupid, because that's what the industry loves to do. Miss Lou said the starvation could be a factor in the death, and that large numbers of dead birds in one area was abnormal. Well, it's not anymore. Everything was abnormal pre-Fukushima. Now it's just the norm. As I got further around the point, there was a large quantity of birds that were flying and alive. There was also an awful lot of dead ones. It was to the point where you literally had to watch where you were stepping to avoid a pile of dead birds. And they all died of starvation. That's crazy, isn't it? Testing from the department, very unusual for Australia, even suggests that they died of starvation, by the way. Primary industries and regional developments, so bless their hearts for doing that, have ruled out reportable diseases, including avian influenza. And there's a few, like when they had the big alleged avian influenza in 2022, when it killed all the why can't I ever remember the names of those birds that I love so much? You know, the big white ones with the black will die from high heights, bullet like down into the ocean. They're called, it's just because there's so many species, right? And we used to study them out on Baccaloo Island here. Who knows? I'll probably remember in a few minutes. The disease has devastated bird populations across the world. It's predicted to have some greatest impacts as we've seen overseas. But these were all we covered these stories of alleged avian influenza. The species were always empty stomachs, no muscle mass. Such as terns. Now, I seen 3 terns last night. There was 2 of them were chasing another tern up in the air. They were making a lot of noise, and last year we seen 2. We should see just almost 1 million of them right now. But I seen 3 of them last night because I know what they sound like. So as soon as I heard it, I was like, holy shit, where the hell are they too? I was looking at the shoreline because I like the shorelines. They were actually way up in the air. Once you spotted them, they were like, two of them were chasing another one. I'm assuming two males chasing a female. Terns primarily eat a variety of marine life, small fish, crustacean, insects. They actually eat insects. And mollusks, clams and mussels. So that's the worst thing a bird can eat is clams and mussels. It'll be hard to find them now, right? That's an insane thing too, isn't it? I'll show you what I mean by that in a moment. So they say the H5N1 strains wreaked havoc across the globe, but not detected in Australia. Now, we've covered stories where they claimed it was in Australia. So starvation could be the factor in the death, and large numbers of dead birds in one area was abnormal. There's a lot of concerning things going on with the ocean ecology at the moment. Yeah. Seeing a large group of 100 of one species is really quite unusual, and that's why there was a lot of concern. Like, I think they found 15 puffins in 2016, 2017, dead puffins in the water and on beaches, and they assumed that at least half the population must have died for them to find that many. So imagine finding over 1.1 million common murres and 1.4 million Cassini auklets when you think about that particular statement, right? Of the puffins. The puffins are all emaciated. A deadly bacteria is threatening marine animals along the Santa Cruz coastline. A leprosy type. At least 3 dead sea lions washed up near Seascape and Beer Can beaches. This is a strange name. The advanced state of decay of the sea lions prevented experts from doing tests that could determine the actual cause of death. So these are conjectures, these are opinions. Researchers have been seeing a recent uptick in the cases of leptospirosis or something in other live marine animals. It's a type of bacterial blood infection, which absolutely, for compromised immune systems is possible, causes a range of illnesses in animals and humans, from flu-like symptoms to organ failures, which we're seeing a lot of that post-Fukushima. Finding dead marine mammals washed ashore during this season isn't unusual. Well, it is pre-Fukushima. It's not unusual post-Fukushima. Deaths typically peak during the summer month post-Fukushima, not pre-Fukushima. Yeah, deaths happen, but they're usually consumed by all the other species. Right, that was the cycle of life. What we're seeing is a total different spectrum of how they're framing it. But the spread and proliferation of diseases among marine mammals have to become increasingly difficult to predict. Previously, the California coast would see a rise in this blood disorder cases every 3 to 5 years, but now researchers are seeing them all year, every year. Excuse me. They can do the garbage can diagnosis of climate change, but what is climate change? It's 80 years of emissions of radiation from... Currently, there's over 1,000 fuel pools worldwide, creating invisible snowstorms of radioactive fallout around the planet, and every atom is pulsing energy at the speed of light every second for long past humanity's prediction of existing and species. And rising ocean acidity levels, which is caused by the death of the phytoplankton, the heating of the ocean to the earth. A dead brise whale just found on North Vancouver Island. Look at the peanut head on that guy. They feed on plankton, which was almost wiped out in 2011. Like when you look at the ocean, you see clear water. That's not normal this time of year. The water should be really murky looking because each glass of water should have 1 billion creatures. And particularly this year, each year, and rather in the summertime, the water is full of larvae and eggs and microscopic animals because all the species are reproducing. And the species, like a lean codfish might produce 700,000 eggs. An oyster might produce 11 million eggs. And their original development, they're considered phytoplankton, by the way. So it's not just plant matter that's considered phytoplankton. Even the microscopic species in their infancy are considered microscopic animals. But that's a clear emaciation right there. The peanut head, that's undeniable. And the poor shape, you don't have any symmetrical blubber, for instance, right? That's a bronze whale washed up. It doesn't belong there. We never see him out there. There's also the possibility that because of warming water, the whale was disoriented because of the domoic acid poisoning. I call them garbage can diagnosis because of how often they're invoked, right? Let me see here. I got the little Zodiac, right? So I'm planning on putting that in the water the weekend and getting codfish. That's my plan this weekend. That'll be the first time I've ever went out post-Fukushima and got codfish. But because we've been covering this for so long, it's not going to, my take on it is it's probably not going to have much more radiation than you're going to get in any other kind of food. And I love seafood, and I miss it so much. I'm not going to go nuts or something like that, but my plan is to get out there, document the fact there's no seabirds, and jig a couple of codfish for consumption. And even if I wanted shellfish, you are not going to find any shellfish west coast or the east coast of Canada, United States, in the tide zones. They're completely gone. There's nothing there whatsoever. In California, there was a couple of whales found. I'm not saying I'm going to do that 100% the weekend because I'm kind of limited to what I can do right now. But that was my hopes anyway. I'm allowed to go out on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday and get 5 codfish a day. In California, there was a couple of whales found dead with domoic poisoning has been indicated. In California, there was a couple of whales. Whales breed air, by the way. They're not like your typical fish that is immersed in it. That's all. They don't have another option for oxygen. The death comes after 2 other whales found dead in BC this month. It's very interesting. Why would you you're talking about the Royal West Coast, right? We've done research expeditions right along that coastline. In fact, I'll show you that right now. Come up in a moment. The cause of death hasn't been found as of now. Well, that's clearly emaciation. That's what he died. And just let me get rid of everything we covered so far, which is absurd. It's an absurd amount of stuff we've already covered here tonight. And that's why I'm doing the show tonight, because I got a whole pile out there on my computer to get to the weekend, right? I never stop despite what's happened to me now. The shock is kind of worn off. I'm accepting that. I'm accepting that I don't have a pension anymore. I'm accepting that I'm going to have to struggle every day now to keep this. But we do have the operation. It's all built. We have all the equipment. Everything is. We don't own any money on it. I think we're in good shape. We just need a small amount of support. I'm not asking for. I'm not like everybody else out there looking for an enormous amount of money. I would love to have it, but I can survive on $1,200 a month. Keep this operation alive. And I have to sacrifice a lot of things to make that happen. I got no issues with that. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going away. I'm not giving up. And so we launched research expeditions from Vancouver, British Columbia for 6 years to Alaska. And we done it in good faith. I was out there by myself 4 to 5 months a year without coming home. We had absurd amount of documentation, like spiked. So this is not a model, this is a documentation of the French government showed 1 million to 10 million times normal. And this model is based on 16 days of radioactive fallout. Or no, that model is 31 days of radioactive fallout. So I launched research expeditions for the species. We had all kinds of different radioactive fallout documented. These are all based on 20 days. And the planet banned food from 55 prefectures. Or 14 prefectures by 55 countries. So that's what a healthy coastline looked like in 2011. And so I launched these research expeditions. The pictures behind me are my pictures. The pictures to your left is what I'm supposed to see there. And so all the shellfish are gone. All of them. Like the clams, the little next manillas, the razorbacks. The starfish, there's around 80 species plus, each species multiple vibrant colors. There was around 70 species of sponges. There was incredible diversity of 700 species of algae. There was 480 species of worms in the tidal zones to your left, right? I should never be able to put my Zodiac up on the beach because these sea urchins would normally be at the water at low tide, right? So you couldn't dare go into the coastline. You couldn't walk down there because there would be so much diversity, you would slip and fall down and hurt yourself. And there was around 80 species of the sea anemones. There's like those circles you see up there. They can be like 2 to 3 feet, the giant sea plume. Multiple vibrant colors. There's around 80 species of them. They're gone. There was all the snails. There was all the periwinkles. There was all the clams, the oysters, the scallops, the abalones, the razorback clams, little neck manillas, the cockles. There was 5,500 invertebrates without the backbones were living in the 700 algae in the tidal zones. All of it was wiped out. So when we discovered that, we went back for 5 more years, 3 to 4 months a year on the ocean, to see if the species were recovering. We had already documented, and we documented it by going there, physically providing the GPSs and pictures of the GPS and pictures of that coastline so that these research expeditions could be replicated. Now, it might look like all sunshine and fun to you, but typically this is what my day looked like. It was miserable. So instead of being species, the only color on the beach was my doggy. This is what I looked like 5 years ago. I was very healthy. Not healthy, because I spent 10 years in a hospital bed, 5 years learning to walk again after pushing my limits with the commercial diving. I got caught. I should have retired 5 years earlier. So the species to your left now are exterminated. And one of the very candid moments, they came out and they blamed the species die-off, saying that a cancer mutation, unprecedented mutation, allowed cancer to spread from one species to another like a virus. So cancer spread from one species to another species, and that's why all the species died. They didn't assert that, they didn't keep repeating that, but that was one of their rare acknowledgements the species were gone. But generally they refuse to acknowledge the species are gone. And in fact, their version now is, there never was that many starfish, there never was that many sea urchins, there never was that many sea anemones, there never was that many shellfish, there never was. No, it's all a figment of our imagination. This is a tropical rainforest with 29,000 islands, 27,000 islands, and I spent 6 years doing research expeditions in desperation to find out whether this was going to recover or not, and didn't. And for that incredible crime, I've lost my pension. I've been demonized by around 1,600 medias. I've been attacked, I've been slandered, I'm under siege. There's sites dedicated to attacking me. There's YouTube channels dedicated to denigrating my name. And I knew that was coming. And that's a small price to pay to get up and fight for these species. It's a very small price to pay. Genetic tweaks in mosquitoes block malaria transmission without affecting insect health. So this is like another Frankenstein. So they say that the mosquitoes are not a keystone species, but they are. And we don't know long-term, many generations down the road, how that affect. Like how are we going to genetically modify all the mosquitoes so they don't transfer malaria? All of these assertions are insane, what they're saying. Yeah, and malaria is real. It kills a lot of people. So come up with a cure. They're working period in nature. And nature, of course, is notorious for posting fake radiation studies. They also supply pollen for plants, and they're a food source for many insects, for fish, for frogs, for trout, for all kinds of species. Report paints a grim picture how nuclear war could impact oceans. Well, the reality of it is, I got more here to chew off than I can get through tonight. I'm not going to get through it all. And so we're going to prepare another show for that. I'm going to be back doing regular shows 4 or 5 days a week coming up. I'm not. So we raised enough money, $1,455. Colette, over and beyond, donated $400. No particular orders. Tabitha G donated $100. Ira B donated $330. Heidi B donated $130. James Lucid donated $520. It was $1,455. Now this was an emergency fund we raised, right, to pay off my bills because they killed my pension. I didn't know they had done that to me, right? I appealed it. Well, I knew 4 weeks ago now, I guess. I knew they had done it to me. I had appealed everything. I thought that was the industry just messing with me. I can get everything sorted out. And I got the no reply email, the feared no reply that my appeals were unsuccessful. And I've had a nervous breakdown this last week and everything else. In the last couple of days, I woke up 2 days ago in an utter panic. And I realized I was going to have to stop that because I was going to, I'm physically going to hurt myself because I'm so sick to my stomach with the fact that my pension is gone. I got injured as a commercial diver. I was driving 100-day trips back to back to back. I wasn't some lazy bum or something like that. I was a very productive. I loved life. I was very busy. I had a big company. So I was going to retire diving that year, and I had a company. I had two companies. I had Marine Channel Productions Limited, which was going to put 100 cameras onto the ocean and stream that live over the internet, but the bandwidth wasn't quite there at that time. And I had another company where I had attained 20 ponds in the British Columbia mountains from fisheries and oceans and forestries. I had all the permits, and they gave me 20 ponds. And what I was going to do, we were going to build. When I finished working, we had a company in Victoria, British Columbia, was going to build us a submarine for about $400,000 that was going to go down and get logs. And these are 150-year-old logs that had sunk from the old logging days when they used to use the big horses. You ever see those pictures of these massive old-growth cedar? And so at the bottom of these mountain ponds, there's no oxygen. So it could be 400 or 500 feet down, 600 feet down. Is these perfectly, and these are high, every 33 feet is a 14.6 pounds per square inch of pressure on the logs. So when you get down 400, 500, 600 feet, the logs are under enormous pressure. There's no oxygen, so there's no bacteria, insects, or fungi, or anything down there that can hurt it. And so you have a perfectly preserved log. And I was supposed to retire as a commercial diver that year. I had licenses from I can't remember the name of the company now, in Vancouver, that was going to give them, it was about $1 million worth of licenses, with $400 to pay the divers, and I would just operate the boat. and they get the product because it's their license, right? And then when the license gets to market, then you would get an adjustment on your check. So I was looking at $600,000 a year job for working 6 or 7 weeks a year. And that was going to fund my logs, and the logs were selling at that time for something like $700 per cubic foot for that pressurized old growth treated lumber. They used that on airplanes, they used that on exotic cars, and that the government was buying it off you. You were guaranteed massive money. And we had the whole thing figured out because as a commercial diver, I'm used to flotation. We had barges, it was me. I had barges set up and Sikorsky helicopters to pick the logs up and bring them down to the coastline and drop them on the barge. And so I had everything planned out, and I got injured. It was a severe diving accident, decompression injury to the spinal column, brainstem. And I had to rebuild my life, I had to retrain. It took me 10 years to get out of a hospital bed, 5 years to learn to walk again. I was out there immediately then on research expeditions on sticks. I was using walking sticks for the first couple of years. Well, I was using a wheelchair the first year. I lost it overboard. And I tried to get a wheelchair in Prince Rupert when I was in getting fuel and groceries. I didn't want to give up because I was afraid I wouldn't raise enough money to head back up for the research. So I went to Red Cross. I went to a bunch of other places to get a loaner wheelchair. And I had sticks, right? Because, I was able to use sticks at that time. I wasn't very strong. And so slowly but surely it built up to the point where I was able... One day I got out of the Zodiac and I was walking around without the sticks. Well, it led up to using one stick. And after 4 or 5 months later, I was... got out of the Zodiac and I was walking up the beach and never had no stick and I was panicked. Like I almost sat down where I was. Then I just took my time, went back to the boat and got a stick. And then I started realizing that I could do things without the sticks, the walking sticks. So it took me a long time. It was a lot of work. It was an incredible struggle to learn to walk again. I'm still not very healthy. And now I'm full-blown into the nuclear industry. We've done all the 6 years of research expeditions. They were brutal. It was very difficult times. I don't regret a second. And now I'm in a very humble position where I need 20 people. I'm okay right now, but I need 20 people over this month in a week or two to start trying to figure out how they can donate $100 to me. Some of them might be able to donate more, and we will need that for sure, right? But if out of the 20 people, if 14 people can donate $100 each month, not all 20, but at least 14, right? Because some people have other obligations that show up and they can't donate the $100. So if 13 or 14 people donate the $100 each month, I'm not going anywhere. And so if I got to sit here and beg the last week of every month to get the rest of the money, I'll demean myself on a drop of a hat rather than give this up, rather than stop doing what I'm doing, rather than let this disgusting industry walk away. And I don't intend to see that happening, right? So the only place you can donate to me right now is PayPal. And links are below to that. But I do have that other system that we were using, but we lost access to my site. I can't afford to renew my site, which is 400 Canadian, and I can't afford to pay off my phone bill, which got 2 months behind, right? So I'm going to have to get a new phone number. I accept that too. I'm not liking it, but there's nothing I can do about it. I got to keep this operation. All the other stuff I can't do without. And so I'm reorganized. I'm not here to... I'm going to be much more thoughtful in telling these stories. I'm going to dedicate much more time to articulating. And when we're going to get back into the news cycle, the shows starting Sunday. And big hugs for everybody that was able to support me. Bless your heart. It's hard to comprehend the stress, the enormous, unbelievable, the panic and the stress and the nervous breakdown I just went through. And now I come to this stage where I'm like, I'd be insane to not try to do what I'm told you I'm going to do. I'd be insane. this is what I do, right? I've been doing this for so long, I can't comprehend not doing it. I can't comprehend the nuclear industry getting away with what they're getting away and everything else. So I'm not going anywhere. I'm here to fight. And the next month, we're in good shape. Our bills are taken care of. And we are going to war against this industry. And don't expect James to be producing very many songs for a while. He's not doing too good. But when he gets a chance, I'm pretty sure it's impossible for him to do anything regular right now. And we wish him the best of luck because he's already produced 360, 70 songs. What more do you want? 365 songs and videos. Mostly songs, right? And you can check out, I put a link in there below, but it won't show up for 12 hours after my show. What have I got down here? Oh, I'm still in that one, okay. James Lucid on YouTube. There's links in the bottom of my description for that. And we're going to play Nuclear Belgium. I already got it queued up. We'll see everybody on Sunday. Hugs for everybody. Thank you, everybody. Hugs for everybody. I know a lot of people were pretty unhappy, and not just me, so bless your hearts too. Take care. We'll see everybody on the next show. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you make it this far. And consider donating next week or the week after or something. It really, we're forced to survive now. And that's what we'll do until we can change that. Take care.
100 hands, reverse the law. Phase one set, now put on pause. They claimed the grid could not endure and fed the myth of power pure. The fuel was buried, not the plan. It only waits for votes to stand. From all they stacked the vessels deep. T-hands ran long though did not sleep. No chant was sung, no grave was raised. Just softer lights in western bays. A farmer passed through fields unclaimed. No one asked what was in name. Nuclear Belgium, hear the ground. Not a soul to turn it down. Nuclear Belgium, soul that's clean. Ballots cast, the elites decree. Nuclear Belgium, built to last. But the river learns too fast. They wrote it down in 23, then turned the page before the plea. The cause they pitched became a door, a lease renewed without a floor. The mask was spun in policy, but no one asked the river's fee. Nuclear Belgium, hear the ground. Not a soul to turn it down. Nuclear Belgium, soul that's clean. Ballots cast, the elites decree. Nuclear Belgium, built to last. But the river learns too fast. Now tell the child in Malta today what steams beneath the concrete base. Dessel's drums and Tsunami lie, and NATO carries what we weigh. The wind from Flanders bends its back. The scaffold stands, but none look back. Nuclear